Cheated by my wife who live-streamed her affair with my best friend, I planned the ultimate revenge. After 5 years, I found myself leaving a business show a day early for the first time. I work for a telecommunications company, and each year we engage in 3 business shows held in different cities around the country, each lasting 5 days. We set up our booth on Sunday and Monday, and the show begins Tuesday morning, concluding at noon on Thursday. For the past 5 years, I've diligently worked at every show, staying until the last box was packed and loaded onto the truck Thursday afternoon. However, during the last show in May at the San Diego Convention Center, I twisted my ankle on Tuesday night, rendering me unable to work in our booth the next day. At lunch on Wednesday, my boss told me there was no point in staying at the show if I couldn't work, instructing me to check for a flight home. I didn't need to be told twice. I was on a plane back to St. Louis at 2 that afternoon. Before boarding the flight in San Diego, I called home and left a message for Tammy, my wife of 9 years, informing her I would be home by 8 that evening. Tammy had been upset with me about something before I left on the trip, but she didn't want to discuss it at the time, suggesting we deal with it upon my return. Despite disliking the sprained ankle and my boss telling me to go home before the conference was over, I was glad to be getting home early to find out what was bothering my wife. When my taxi stopped in front of the house, I noticed a black Cadillac in our driveway. I didn't know anyone who drove a Cadillac, and it bothered me a little that Tammy would have company at the house when she knew I was coming home. I thought she would be anxious to discuss whatever problem she thought we had. Entering the front door, I heard voices in the family room. Stepping into the kitchen and peeking into the family room, I got the shock of my life. Tammy was sitting on the sofa with my best friend, Chad Williams. This itself was not the shock. The fact that Tammy's blouse was unbuttoned was what struck me so hard. Tammy and Chad hadn't seen me yet. As I walked through the kitchen and stood at the edge of the family room, I exclaimed, questioning the situation unfolding before me. Tammy, taken aback by my sudden appearance, inquired about my unexpected return. Her expression, and the fact that she didn't bother concealing the unbuttoned blouse, hinted at an odd anticipation of this moment. I further inquired about the situation, seeking an explanation. Tammy, wearing a smile, assured me that it wasn't what I thought. As I grappled with the surrealness of the moment, the pain in my ankle served as a harsh reminder, dispelling any doubts about the reality of the situation. During my brief time in the room, Chad remained motionless, staring at me with an amused expression. I had reached my limit. Despite Chad's size and the pain in my ankle, I was determined to eject him from my house. Taking a step toward the sofa, I suddenly found myself in the grip of another man. His approach was silent, and he swiftly grabbed my right arm, twisting it up behind my back, while his left arm formed a chokehold around my neck. I could still breathe, but the threat to cut off my airway loomed. Tammy made a declaration, asserting that I now comprehended the situation. She revealed that they had been anticipating my arrival to initiate their peculiar celebration. Chad had divulged details about my actions at business shows, prompting Tammy to question if I thought she would never uncover my indiscretions, or if I believed she wouldn't be affected. She expressed her hurt and intentions for revenge, outlining a plan to derive pleasure from Chad and Tyrone while I observed. My attempts to explain were thwarted as the man restraining me covered my mouth and nose. The smell overwhelmed me, and soon I felt consciousness slipping away. I awoke tied spread eagle to the bed in the guest bedroom, my injured ankle throbbing as if pressed against a hot iron. Speaker wires secured my wrists and ankles tightly, cutting off circulation. Momentarily forgetting Tammy's earlier words, I was reminded when I heard voices on the television at the end of the bed. Looking at the screen, I saw Tammy sitting undressed with Chad. Tammy, addressing the camera, expressed her hope that I was awake. She intended to showcase a significant tool she planned to enjoy. Chad was granted the initial opportunity due to his revelation of my infidelity and assistance in orchestrating the situation. Tammy then summoned Tyrone to display his own impressive tool. Tyrone, the man who had seized me, joined in and wished me to appreciate the upcoming spectacle. He mentioned the recording of the event, allowing me the option to watch it repeatedly at my leisure. At that moment, I cared little about Tammy's actions. Our marriage was over. My priority was freeing myself from the bindings, concerned about the lack of blood circulation to my hands and feet. Uncertain of when Tammy and her friends would finish, I wasn't willing to wait. I began pulling with my left leg, enduring the pain, pausing for seconds, and then repeating the process. After several attempts, I gave one hard yank and the wire snapped. Observing a bleeding left ankle, the injuries appeared manageable. Following that, I attended to my right leg, a more challenging task due to the sprained right ankle. Breaking the wires on my right leg resulted in substantial skin tearing, leading to significant bleeding. With liberated legs, I eased the strain on my arms, but the wire knots resisted loosening. Armed only with my teeth, I attempted to break the wires binding my wrist, mirroring the process used on my ankles. Upon freeing my right wrist, it bled nearly as profusely as my right ankle. Having both legs and my right arm free, I easily broke loose from the last of my bindings. My left wrist sustained minor cuts, causing slight bleeding. Once free, I observed ongoing bleeding from injuries to both ankles and wrists. A search for makeshift bandages in the room yielded nothing, and the bedsheet was a disarray of blood, surprising me with its quantity. Attempting to stand, dizziness forced me to sit down again. Now my head pounded, my face ached, and I felt nauseous. With closed eyes, I tried to settle my stomach when I heard my name. Initially, I thought Tammy had entered the room, but upon opening my eyes, I recognized that she was addressing me through the television. She asked if I was watching what was unfolding on the screen. Turning my gaze to the television, I observed Tammy involved in closeness acts with Chad, with them positioned in an all-fours style. Briefly considering whether Tammy believed I would derive pleasure from watching her, I knew that comprehending my current anger would drive her away. Exiting the bed, I swung my right arm toward the television, causing blood to splatter across the screen. Turning away, I saw my reflection in the mirror, revealing a prominent bruising bump on my forehead, consisting of 4 small lumps resembling knuckle marks. In disbelief, I processed the fact that my wife orchestrated a scenario where I was befuddled, maltreated, and tied to a bed, only for her to engage in closeness acts with my former best friend and an unfamiliar acquaintance. Thoughts of grabbing a baseball bat crossed my mind, but I hesitated, considering my weakened state, lingering dizziness from the medication, and uncertainty about Chad and his friend overpowering me. Restrained by my impulsive reaction, I also considered the potential consequences, including causing damage or loss of life, which deterred me from taking drastic measures. Examining the room's chaos once more, an idea began to form. I smeared blood on the bedposts and pillows, then created 2 smeared parallel lines of blood on the carpet going from the side of the bed to the door. I proceeded across the hall to the guest bathroom and located gauze and adhesive tape under the sink. Before leaving the bathroom, I ensured there was no blood left in the sink, on the cabinet door, or on the floor. Fortunately, our house had the master bedroom downstairs, alleviating concerns about Tammy or her companions overhearing me. Returning to the bedroom, I utilized my training to administer first aid to myself. I wrapped both ankles in my left wrist, leaving only the injuries to my right wrist exposed. Then, picking up the cordless phone by the bed, I made sure to get blood on it and dialed emergency. Upon the emergency operator's response, I urgently pleaded for help, expressing my fear that they were going to eliminate me. Overwhelmed by the situation, I exclaimed, "Oh God," keeping the connection intact. I let the phone fall to the floor. Along with the gauze and tape I had grabbed, I made my way down the back stairway that led to the garage and left the house. Passing by the car in the driveway, I smeared some blood on the driver's door handle and left my bloody handprint on the trunk lid. Afterward, I walked over to the empty lot across the street, found a hiding place behind some bushes, and sat down to await the unfolding events. While waiting, I bandaged my right wrist. The wait was brief, and within 5 minutes, the first police car arrived. 2 officers disembarked and approached the house, while a second car pulled in and its officers headed to the back. While the officer at the front door waited, one of them rang the doorbell, waited, rang it again, and after another 30 seconds, pounded on the door. The front porch light illuminated, and Tammy opened the door. From my vantage point, it seemed like she might have been startled when she saw the police at the door, though I was too far away to discern her expression. The officers informed her about the emergency call from the address a few minutes ago and inquired about the nature of that call. Tammy denied any knowledge of the emergency call and insisted she was alone in the house. The officers pressed further, not accepting her response. Tammy maintained that she was home alone, explaining that her husband was out of town at a business show. However, Tammy's situation took a turn for the worse when the 2 officers returning from the back revealed Chad and Tyrone in custody. The officer holding Chad declared, "Look who we found sneaking out the back door." Witnessing Chad and Tyrone, Tammy seemed to lose her composure, sliding down against the door casing until she sat on the floor. An officer assisted Tammy to her feet and escorted her back inside. Meanwhile, the other officers ushered Chad and Tyrone into the house. Unfortunately, I couldn't witness the events inside, but imagine the scene when the police opened the door to the guest bedroom, revealing the mess. The shocked look on Tammy's face upon discovering my absence would be priceless. Yearning to sneak across and get into the car's trunk, I refrained from risking visibility. 10 minutes of silence passed, followed by a crescendo of noise and confusion. 2 more police cars arrived with sirens and lights. Subsequently, Chad and Tyrone were led out in handcuffs, vehemently arguing they did nothing to the woman's husband. The pair was placed in the back seat of separate cars and driven away. Meanwhile, police officers closely inspected the car in the driveway. The blood on the driver's door handle was swiftly noticed, followed by the discovery of blood on the trunk lid. An officer retrieved the car keys from Tyrone's car and opened the trunk. I truly wished I could have been in the trunk when he opened it, but as it turned out, it didn't matter. The officer inspecting the trunk called another officer over, and then a third. "We have weapons and medications here," the officer called out to a plainclothes officer who had just arrived on the scene. 3 MAC 10 seconds and about a kilo of what appears to be cocaine. Over the next 20 minutes, I observed as the police photographed the trunk contents of Tyrone's car and had the car towed away. The 2 cars carrying Chad and Tyrone left, and shortly afterward, Tammy emerged from the house in handcuffs, placed into a patrol car, and driven away. Police officers remained in the house, and I watched as they secured the front door with crime scene tape. I decided then that it was time for me to leave. I walked through the empty lot to the street behind, and then, keeping to the shadows, I walked the 10 blocks to a shopping center with a McDonald's restaurant. I realized that I looked pretty messed up, with bloody bandages on my wrists and ankles and a black and blue goose egg on my forehead, but I needed to get off the street for a while. I had just enough change in my pocket to buy a large cup of coffee. When I walked into the restaurant, I expected everyone to stare at me, but as it turns out, I fit right in with the crowd in that particular McDonald's. There must have been 15 street people in there, either eating a burger or drinking coffee. No one paid any attention to me as I sat in a corner and drank my coffee. As I thought about what I had instigated, I couldn't help but smile. The image of Tammy, Chad, and Tyrone being questioned by the police almost made me laugh out loud. The police would be asking them what they did with my body, and of course they couldn't answer that question. Anything they did say would be assumed to be lies. The one problem I still had was how to reappear and not be accused of intentionally misleading the police. By the time I finished my coffee, I had an idea that I thought would work. When I took my empty coffee cup up to the counter to ask for a refill, the manager came over and told me he would refill my cup if I would then leave the restaurant. I accepted his offer. With a fresh cup of coffee in hand, I started off on the 20-block walk to a park I was familiar with, ducking behind trees and shrubs whenever I saw a car coming. Considering the difficulty I had walking on my injured ankle, it took me nearly an hour to walk to the park. Once there, I found a picnic table in a dark corner and sat there until 3 in the morning. At that time, I removed my bandages and threw them in the trash. Then I moved to the far side of the park and lay down in the grass next to a jogging trail. Despite the pain in my wrists and ankles, especially my right ankle, I was able to sleep on and off until the sun began to come up. I lay as still as I could, hoping that I might even fall asleep again as I waited for what I knew was going to happen. The park I was in was a favorite for joggers and people walking their dogs in the morning. I knew that I would soon be discovered by one of them. I was right, and within a half hour, I was in the back of an ambulance headed for the hospital. I had left my wallet on the bedside table in the guest room at home, so I had no identification when I got to the hospital. For some reason, I wasn't coherent when the doctors in the emergency room tried to find out who I was and what happened to me. I also had a hard time staying awake. I ensured that my charade didn't conclude prematurely, and it wasn't until almost noon that the police arrived. Pretending to be asleep until nearly, I then prepared myself to talk. I had rehearsed what I would say and how I would respond to questions to avoid straying too far from the truth. The plainclothes officer, Detective Munson, approached and inquired if I was Mr. George Grant. Confirming my identity, I agreed to answer his questions, but expressed uncertainty about how much help I could be, emphasizing my lack of memory about the events. Detective Munson explained that I was found in a park by a man walking his dog around 6 that morning, and encouraged me to share what I did remember. I recounted returning home from a trip to San Diego the previous night, arriving a day earlier than planned. Upon entering the house, I discovered my wife talking to my best friend, Chad Williams. When I questioned them, someone grabbed me from behind, making it difficult for me to breathe as my wife Tammy began yelling at me. I struggled to concentrate on her words due to my breathing difficulties. I believe they must have befuddled me because the next thing I recall is waking up in our guest bedroom tied to the bed. I noticed bleeding where they had tied my wrists and ankles, and I was starting to lose sensation in my hands and feet. Despite my attempts to free myself, I ended up causing more damage to my wrists and ankles. It was during this time that I noticed the television on, broadcasting from the master bedroom. Tammy was engaged in closeness activities with Chad and another man, a large individual I had never seen before. I thought I heard them discussing their plans for me after they finished with my wife. Although my thinking was still a bit unclear, it sounded like they were contemplating eliminating me. I believed they were assaulting Tammy and that the intention was to eliminate both of us. That's when I successfully broke free from the wire used to tie me to the bed. Subsequently, I called emergency. Detective Munson inquired about why I dropped the phone during that call. I explained that I dropped it when I realized Tammy was a willing participant. It seemed like I heard her say something like, "Go take care of that idiot." Fearing for my safety, I decided to attempt an escape from the house. However, I don't remember anything after that, even though I obviously managed to get out. Detective Munson inquired if I recalled anyone hitting me, to which I responded that I didn't think so. But much of what happened was still a little hazy. Curious about my wife's perspective, I asked Munson what Tammy was saying about the incident. He relayed that she claimed to have found out about my alleged infidelity during my business trips and wanted to teach me a lesson. According to her, I wasn't supposed to be injured, and they planned to release me once she had sought her revenge. Intrigued, I asked if she mentioned where she got the idea that I cheated. Munson explained that she said Mr. Williams told her about it, referring to me as a stupid pig. I expressed frustration that the only evidence she had of my alleged affair came from one person, the very person with whom she chose to seek revenge. I questioned Tammy's judgment, stating that I believe she was smarter than to fall for such manipulation. Munson continued, and I confirmed that I had never cheated on my wife. I asserted that she could have easily asked me about it, and I could have proven that I hadn't cheated. Detective Munson asked me a few questions to clarify some points, but he didn't challenge anything I had said. I was released from the hospital the following day. Upon returning home, there was a message on our answering machine from Tammy. She pleaded with me to come down to the police station and tell them it was all a misunderstanding. She needed me to post her bail so she could get out. I deleted the message and grabbed a beer from the refrigerator. The phone rang again, and it was Susan Crawford, Tammy's best friend. Susan, a divorcee, had been caught cheating by her husband, who promptly kicked her out. I never liked Susan and didn't appreciate her influence on Tammy. Somehow, I knew she played a role in Tammy's actions. Susan urgently insisted on talking to me, so out of curiosity, I invited her over. She arrived an hour later and informed me that she had spoken to Tammy. According to Susan, Tammy was at her parents' house and accused me of cheating on her during my business trips. I vehemently denied the accusation, emphasizing that I had never cheated on her. Susan mentioned that Tammy didn't provide many details, only stating that there was a misunderstanding and I had called the police, resulting in her arrest. In response, I recounted the same details to Susan that I had shared with Detective Munson, as most of it was the truth. Susan pretended to be shocked, but she didn't turn against Tammy. She expressed disbelief, stating that such behavior was unlike Tammy and suggested that she might be going through some kind of breakdown. Curious about my intentions, Susan asked if I planned to talk to Tammy and give her a chance to explain her side of things. I responded that I might consider it, but I questioned why Tammy hadn't given me the same consideration. If she thought I was behaving improperly, why didn't she discuss it with me before taking such drastic actions? I inquired if Tammy had spoken to Susan about the situation, to which Susan replied in the negative, affirming that if Tammy had, she would have advised her to talk to me about it. I didn't believe that for a minute. I was pretty sure Susan didn't think highly of me, so I doubted she would have objected to Tammy's revenge plan. Susan mentioned that she didn't know what got into Tammy and advised me not to do anything until I had all the facts. I assured her that I wouldn't take any hasty actions. Susan kissed me on the mouth and asked if there was anything she could do to help me. Despite being certain of her intentions, I feigned ignorance and told Susan that she had already been a great help. I explained that I just needed some time alone. After Susan left, I promptly contacted a lawyer and scheduled an appointment for that afternoon at 2 with Brian L. Townsend III. During the meeting, I briefly outlined Tammy's actions and expressed my desire for him to initiate divorce proceedings against her without delay. I conveyed my preference for serving her with the divorce papers the very next day. Mr. Townsend, expressing concern, asked if I was sure I wanted to proceed so quickly, before having all the facts. He suggested taking more time to think about it, citing his experience in handling divorces and the potential for saving marriages if couples spent more time considering their decisions. I acknowledged Mr. Townsend's suggestion, agreeing that perhaps I should give the situation more time. Expressing satisfaction, he was glad that I was willing to consider waiting. I suggested postponing the service of divorce papers on Tammy to the day after tomorrow, deviating from my initial plan to serve them the next day. Mr. Townsend appeared a bit perplexed, questioning the change in timeline and expressing concerns about moving too fast. In response, I asserted that if he wasn't willing to act promptly on my behalf, I could easily find another lawyer who would. Mr. Townsend acquiesced, agreeing to have the papers served on my wife the day after tomorrow. I provided him with Tammy's location at her parents' house and her work address for the legal proceedings. Upon leaving his office, I felt numb except, of course, for my right ankle, which was still hurting like a son of a weapon. Right after leaving Mr. Townsend III's office, I went to the bank and closed all of our joint accounts and canceled our joint credit cards. Then I opened new accounts in my name only. I knew that eventually I would probably have to give her half of the money, but I was going to make her work for it. Over the next couple of weeks, Tammy attempted to contact me multiple times at both work and home, but I chose not to answer any of her calls. Eventually, my lawyer informed me that Tammy intended to contest the divorce unless I agreed to a meeting where she could present her side of the story. I informed Mr. Townsend III that I needed some time to consider this. After more than a month, I contacted Mr. Townsend III again to inquire if Tammy still insisted on a meeting before agreeing to the divorce. He expressed surprise at the delay and promised to check with her attorney. Later that day, Mr. Townsend III informed me that Tammy indeed still wanted a meeting. I provided instructions for Mr. Townsend III to convey to my wife. I told him to inform her that I would not agree to a face-to-face meeting. If she chose to contest the divorce, that was acceptable, but the proceedings would be put on hold until she was ready to agree to the divorce. During this period, we would remain legally married, but I would neither see nor speak to her. I emphasized the clarity of my stance, and Mr. Townsend III assured me that he would communicate my response to Tammy. The next day, I visited Chad's wife, Beverly. She invited me inside and offered a drink. As we sat on the sofa, she began apologizing for Chad's actions, but I interrupted her, stating that she wasn't responsible for what Chad did, just as I wasn't responsible for what Tammy did. I emphasized that they were accountable for their own actions. Beverly acknowledged my point, but expressed feeling bad about what had happened to me. She then suggested that we might find comfort in each other. I responded playfully, mentioning that I had always found her attractive and that had I met her when I was single, I might have asked her out. Before I could finish, Beverly leaned in and kissed me, expressing her interest in the idea. She led me to the bedroom, where we engaged in slow and deliberate lovemaking. Afterward, Beverly whispered into my ear that she would be open to getting together again for comfort and admitted that she loved what was happening between us. In the following week, I received a call from the district attorney's office. Andrew Hartley, the assistant DA handling the cases against my wife, Chad Williams, and Tyrone Mathers, inquired about my wife's attorney's statement that I might not press charges. I clarified that it was not correct and that I hadn't discussed the matter with anyone. I really don't know what I should do, I said. I know that my wife was involved in what happened to me, but I don't know if she had planned to have me befuddled and maltreated or to have me tied up. I think she did, but I can't prove that. I also don't know who tied me to the bed so tightly that I was losing circulation to my hands and feet. I'm not asking that any charges be dropped, I added. I'll leave it up to you to decide what to do with these people. In the end, everyone got what they deserved. Tyrone was convicted of assault and kidnapping, along with felony medication possession, and another felony for the weapons found in the trunk of his car. Chad pleaded guilty to assault, and Tammy pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit unlawful restraint. Think they made that one up just for her. Chad got 1 year at a minimum security prison, and Tyrone got hard time at a maximum security prison. Tammy got off the easiest. She was put on probation. In spite of the light sentence Tammy got, it was still considered to be a felony conviction. She no longer had any say in the matter of our divorce. I got rid of her but kept the house and all of our savings. A month after our divorce, Susan approached me and suggested that I talk to Tammy. According to Susan, Tammy wanted to explain her actions and offer an apology. Although I acted reluctant to meet with Tammy, I was secretly curious to hear what she had to say. Susan convinced me to meet Tammy at a cocktail lounge about a mile from my house. As Tammy slid into the booth across from me, she expressed gratitude for my willingness to see her. She began apologizing for what she had done, explaining that she had just found out about my alleged affairs during my trips. I promptly refuted her claim, stating that I had never cheated on her. Tammy appeared surprised and insisted that at the time she believed Chad's assertion that I was cheating. She explained that she was hurt and angry, causing her to lose perspective. I questioned her logic, pointing out that she already suspected me of infidelity when I asked her what was bothering her before my last trip. Yet, she didn't share her concerns. Tammy admitted that she should have communicated sooner but needed time to process. Mockingly, I highlighted the absurdity of her beliefs and actions, pointing out that she had only Chad's word and didn't bother asking me directly. I questioned why she didn't approach me before planning her revenge and expressed skepticism about Chad's involvement. I sarcastically remarked on the quality of Chad's friends, including Tyrone. I discovered that Chad associated with medication dealers, which was unknown to me. I inquired about how Tammy allowed herself to be in closeness with Tyrone under Chad's influence. Tammy blushed and turned away, admitting that she had slept with Chad the night before my return. She explained that involving Tyrone was meant to add insult to injury. Curious about the expected outcome of her actions, I questioned if Tammy anticipated my forgiveness for what she had done. She responded by expressing her belief that the revenge plan would even the score and allow us to move on. My reaction was another fit of laughter. I pointed out that even if I had been cheating on her, she never caught me in the act. I acknowledged the potential pain she might have felt upon hearing about the alleged affair, but emphasized that she didn't have concrete evidence. You never saw me even talking with another woman, let alone being with one. Instead of confronting me about your suspicions, you decided to get revenge. Your plan was to stimulate me, tie me to the bed and make me watch you with two guys, one of whom used to be my best friend. This whole scenario was meant to humiliate me, and you thought it would make us even. Most wives would have had an affair if they wanted revenge. What you did went way beyond that, and even if I had cheated on you, I couldn't forgive you for what you did. Tammy dropped her head, sobbing. Please give me another chance. I love you. I've always loved you. You're the only man I've ever loved. I didn't mean to hurt you. What I did with Chad and Tyrone was just bed relationships. It had nothing to do with love. Please, can't I do anything to make you love me again? I'll do anything if you'll just give me another chance. Tammy, with wide-open eyes and tears streaming down her cheeks, pleaded with me. I couldn't bear to see her cry. Did you really mean it, Tammy? Did I mean what? She asked. Did you mean it when you said that you would do anything? I asked. Tammy tried to wipe away her tears. Yes, I meant every word of it. I'll do anything you want. I slid out of the booth, stood up, placed my hand on Tammy's shoulder, and bent down so my mouth was close to her ear, saying, "Drop dead." Tammy's head fell onto the table, and she continued crying. I could still hear her crying as I walked out the door. 7 months later, Beverly and I got married. After my cheating ex-wife showed up at our daughter's wedding, she begged me to take her back. Letter from wife. Dear Jeff, as I sit down to put my thoughts into words, I can't help but feel a mix of emotions swirling within me. Leaving you wasn't an easy decision, and I hope you understand that it's not about blame or resentment. It's about acknowledging the changes that have occurred within me and recognizing that I owe it to both of us to address them honestly. Our journey together has been filled with moments of joy, laughter, and shared experiences that I will always treasure. From the early days of our relationship to building a life together, we've weathered storms and celebrated triumphs side by side. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of myself amidst the familiarity of our routine. I want you to know that this decision isn't a reflection of your worth or our love for each other. It's about me needing to rediscover who I am outside of our relationship. I've spent so long defining myself in relation to you that I've neglected my own dreams and desires. Leaving you this letter is my way of being honest with both of us. I couldn't bear to see the hurt in your eyes or hear the pain in your voice as I try to explain these feelings. It's not fair to either of us to prolong the inevitable, and I hope you can find it in your heart to understand. I wish you nothing but happiness and fulfillment in the days ahead. You deserve someone who can love you wholeheartedly, without reservation or hesitation. And I hope that someday we can look back on our time together with fondness, grateful for the lessons learned and the memories shared. Take care of yourself, Jeff. You'll always hold a special place in my heart. I realize that what I'm about to say might come across as hypocritical and selfish, but the truth is it is selfish. And that's why I've made the decision to leave. I crave the excitement of pursuing someone new, the thrill of a fresh romance, and unfortunately, you can't provide that anymore. When we were younger, you were irresistible, playing guitar with Buddy in the band, riding your Harley in that hot leather jacket, your blonde hair flowing in the wind as you swept me off my feet on the dance floor. Whether it was at a rock and roll club or in a ballroom, you created beautiful paintings of me and the kids. But over time, we became complacent in our relationship. The gigs with the band faded as you took on coaching soccer. The Harley now sits idle in the garage beneath the kids' sports gear in front of the minivan, and my knees can't keep up on the dance floor anymore, though you still have that beautiful hair. Now that the kids are grown, I no longer feel comfortable with the minivan lifestyle that you seem to have embraced. I want to assure you that I haven't cheated on you, and you remain the only man I've ever been romantic with. However, I have found myself drawn to other men. Before I considered any further actions, I felt it was necessary to end things with you. I couldn't bear the idea of betraying your trust by sneaking around behind your back, Jeff. I've always loved you too much for that. I'm certain our paths will cross again, but I have no desire to discuss this matter with you. I've already spoken with Sam and asked him to handle our divorce proceedings. He's prepared the necessary paperwork, leaving you with everything except my clothing and personal belongings, which I've already taken. I've also agreed to split my pension with you and take on half of our debts, excluding the mortgage. It's only fair, after all, I played a role in incurring those debts, and I want to ensure fairness. Please grieve in private so that when we attend events for the kids, we can avoid any unnecessary drama. However, I believe in fairness, so if you feel the need to respond, I promise to read your letter carefully and respect your thoughts. With love, Ellen. I poured over the note repeatedly, rooted to the spot in the kitchen where I found it. Tears hadn't come, not yet. I was too numb. There were no signs of this impending revelation, no expression of dissatisfaction, no indication of desires unmet, no arguments, and no hints of another man in her life. We shared touches, kisses, smiles, all the gestures of a couple planning a future together. In fact, I had spent the past year wooing her, attempting to reignite our passion now that our youngest had left for college. I bought jewelry only to be scolded for its expense. She preferred chocolate. I relinquished control of our closeness, believing I was causing her stress by initiating lovemaking. She insisted that holding hands sufficed. Perhaps she did drop a hint, but I brushed it off, attributing it to her adjusting to middle age. So there I stood, the last to realize. I grabbed a beer and stepped into the shower simultaneously. After finishing one, I reached for two more and returned to the shower, leaving behind a trail of water on her floors without fear of reprimand. I drank with determination to exhaust my stash, although, like wine enthusiasts cellar their wines, I stored fine beers. While I didn't dent my beer collection, if I had, I'd have turned to my wines. However, I did make a significant impact on my consciousness. The next morning, I awoke with a throbbing headache, lying undressed on the basement floor. After the shower, I stumbled upstairs, purged everything I'd consumed, crawled into bed, and wept. When I was 11, my grandmother passed away. During her wake and funeral, Grandpa took me aside and imparted wisdom. You have 3 days to mourn a loss. As God resurrected the dead in 3 days, you can resurrect your life. Cry, scream, vent your frustrations. When you're old enough, have a drink, engage in a good brawl, pray. Allow yourself these actions, then move forward. Honor the departed by progressing. A man doesn't dwell on a past. He's lost. He lives in the present he's shaping. In the future he's moving toward. Grandpa's words resonated deeply. I viewed my wife's departure as the end of our marriage. I wept, drank to excess, battered sheetrock walls with my bleeding fists, and used furniture to release my anguish. I yelled, I kicked, I drank. I scarcely ate, justifying that beer consists of grain, yeast, and water akin to bread, and wine is derived from fruit. There, my food groups condensed into 2 bottles. I was on summer break when she chose to leave, waiting until the day after the school year ended. It was a well-timed decision, but by the following Tuesday, I emerged from my mourning. The first thing I did was call my kids. Ellen had already informed them of her choice, and they had desperately tried to reach me. I was too intoxicated to pick up, but I reassured them I was all right. Then I set about tidying up the house and arranged for my favorite charity to collect a truckload of donations. I had no intention of holding on to the remnants of a failed marriage. I kept only the family heirloom furniture, boxing up photos and albums for the kids. Everything else was treated the same way, with the ridiculous knickknacks meeting their end in the trash. What did I care about Spanish pottery or brass cats from Portugal? Over the next couple of days, I made trips to Home Depot, stocking up on flooring, carpet, paint, and new sheetrock. My aim was to transform the house into my own space. The pink and coral walls and frilly curtains were a thing of the past. I also visited Sam's and completed the divorce paperwork. Since it was uncontested with only one lawyer involved, he said it would likely be finalized around the time school resumed. I sold the minivan and traded it in for a '76 Triumph Spitfire convertible, just as I had always dreamed. It was British racing green with beige leather upholstery and chromed wire wheels. After clearing out the garage of unused clutter, unpacking the Harley was a breeze. Yet the most significant decision I made was reaching out to Buddy. That call altered my life as swiftly as my wife's departure letter had just days before. Within half an hour of sharing my news with him, Buddy and the gang were at my doorstep. Buddy had been my closest friend since 3rd grade. We formed our band together, played sports together, took the same classes, and even double-dated. He had been my best man, and I was his. The collapse of my marriage was a profound blow to him, and he wouldn't allow me to navigate the upheaval of my domestic life alone. Our band had disbanded years ago due to life's demands, but our loyal supporters hadn't forgotten us. When I mentioned Buddy and the boys, it's more than just a handful of guys. We played at countless weddings, funerals, parties, and picnics. often offering our services at a discounted rate or for free because we cherished the community that followed us from gig to gig. Good deeds tend to breed more good deeds, and when news spread that I was overhauling my place to make it truly my own, the floodgates of generosity opened wide. Over the next fortnight, painters, carpenters, masons, plumbers, every imaginable tradesman pitched in to fix up much more than just my walls. Within a month, my house had undergone a complete transformation, both inside and out. There's something about a group of guys that attracts a crowd of girls. Their wives and girlfriends began dropping by Project Jeff's house to oversee the renovations, and soon they were bringing along their single friends for what we humorously dubbed Project Jeff's love life. No one was pushy in their matchmaking efforts. It was still too early for that, but it was evident that seeds were being planted. And before long, I found myself out dancing and socializing 2 to 3 nights a week. Spontaneous barbecues and gatherings sprang up at my place, and I was never short of company. Although I wasn't quite ready to dive into a new relationship before finalizing my divorce, Buddy floated the idea of resurrecting the band. In fact, he had already lined up gigs at clubs where we had old connections. Even before the fresh paint had dried on my walls, Buddy and Jeff made a triumphant return, headlining Friday nights at Jimmy's and commanding Saturdays at Cozy Dance Club downtown. He even booked us as a duo for Sunday afternoons at a popular seafood joint by the waterfront. It was as if we had never stopped playing together. We were all at similar stages in our lives, with our kids either grown or independent. We all looked pretty sharp and still had our own hair, well, except for Ronnie, our drummer. We hit the ground running. Our loyal fan base emerged from hibernation, eagerly paying their covers to pack the venues every single night. Whenever my sons had the chance, they'd drop by to lend a hand with the renovations, occasionally even joining in with the band. I ensured they understood not to disclose anything to their mom about me, and to be truthful if she asked. They conveyed that Dad had been upset initially, but has since moved forward and is doing well. My daughter, living in Australia with her fiancé, received similar instructions. I trusted my kids implicitly to honor my wishes, and I knew they were being honest when they assured me that Ellen was kept in the dark about my well-being. To combat loneliness, I focused on cultivating healthy habits, revamping my diet, and ramping up my exercise regimen. I'd never let myself go out of shape, but now I attacked the pool with gusto and hit the road, whether running or biking, with renewed determination. Every evening before heading off to a gig, I hit the weights, alternating between leg days and upper body workouts. Within a month of Ellen's departure, I had rebuilt my home, my social circle, my daily schedule, my relationship with my children, and my physique. It seemed only fitting to respond to her letter. After all, she had initiated the conversation, hadn't she? Dear Ellen, thank you. You were right. Goodbye. Jeff, I sent the email to her, shortened, to the point. It conveyed everything I needed it to. I didn't bother seeking out her new address, and truth be told, I didn't really want it. Rumors floated around about her, whispers of her involvement with a younger man who drove a flashy car and had a silver tongue. They'd been spotted together at shore clubs and beaches. Whenever someone tried to fill me in on her life, I politely declined to listen. But among our shared friends, these snippets pieced together a narrative of a whirlwind romance that spanned from September to June, or perhaps October to June, or even November to May, but none of it mattered to me. I genuinely wished her well. Grandpa's 3-day rule had guided me through, and I was content with the person I had become, too enamored with my present self to dwell on the past. The end of summer marked a melancholy reality for teachers like me, but August was ablaze with musical opportunities. This year was no different. Buddy and I found ourselves booked for festival after festival straight through September. Labor Day saw us performing 2 to 3 times a day. The hectic schedule kept me from checking her email response. It wasn't a deliberate snub. I simply thought our exchange was meant to be brief, a way to tie up loose ends, just as she wanted. I was too engrossed in the whirlwind of events and having too much fun to bother with email. In fact, I had almost forgotten about my marital woes when Sam called with news that our divorce proceedings had expedited. As it turned out, a certain clerk with connections to a family court judge was a fan of our band. I was set to be officially single come Friday. After a month and a half of transformative experiences, Friday would mark my return to bachelorhood. We were slated to perform at an arts festival and street fair in town, and suddenly all those scandal-clad women with short skirts and plunging necklines were fair game. Cool. The street was packed when we hit the stage. We cranked up the amps to outdoor settings and unleashed our hard-driving blues style. We played covers, belted out originals, and jammed out impromptu tunes, getting the crowd fired up and dancing. It felt exhilarating. The guys had rummaged through our archives and unearthed our old masters from back in the day. We never got around to recording an album before life got in the way, but now we had enough material to fill a couple of makeshift albums. CDs were much easier to produce than vinyl, and we compiled a mix of old and new tracks that flew off the sales table. I was receiving looks from women of all ages, signaling that I was more than ready to end my dry spell. Amidst the chaos, I didn't notice Ellen attempting to sneak backstage. As I slung my guitar onto the back bar of my bike, which I had modified years ago for guitar transport, I missed her rushing toward me. I also missed the moment her face fell upon seeing another woman, Michelle, a busty blonde in her 30s, swinging her leg to sit behind me. It was the first time in the entire 25-year life of my bike that someone else had occupied that seat. I didn't see a tear form in Ellen's eye as I drove away from her. I wish I had. Michelle was incredible. I won't delve into explicit details of our encounter or the intensity of our physical connection. You can find that in another story. Let's just say I pursued her relentlessly throughout the night, rebounding like a teenager and reaching heights of satisfaction I hadn't experienced in ages. I completely wore out. By the end of the night, she thanked me for our time together but suggested I not call her again, perhaps wary of the recovery time needed after our escapade. I knew I couldn't avoid Ellen forever, and I didn't. The next time I saw her was at our regular Friday night gig at Jimmy's. She walked in with her new companion and another couple, and they found a table and ordered drinks. As soon as I spotted her, I signaled to the band that we were deviating from our prepared set list. We had a tradition of playing American Woman whenever we spotted an ex-girlfriend in the crowd, and it was always the wronged guy who took the mic. It was our way of standing in solidarity with our friend. We firmly believed that dating an ex of one of us was off limits, and we never crossed that line. As I began playing the guitar riff in the slower, soulful style that Lenny Kravitz had popularized with his cover of the tune, I found myself enjoying American Woman more than ever before. Pouring my heart and soul into the lyrics, the guitar solos resonated with the crowd, igniting their energy. Unaware of Ellen's reaction, I did witness the moment her face fell upon realizing the song was directed at her. But Buddy's wife observed it later. She recounted how tears welled in Ellen's eyes as I sang lines like "Stay away from me" and "Go on and let me be." With emotions flowing freely, Ellen left before the song ended, barely maintaining her composure. Meanwhile, her companion and friend stayed behind, continuing to drink and dance into the night. It was evident that trouble was brewing in paradise. A week later, my older son paid me a visit with some intriguing news. It seemed Ellen and her boy toy had a falling out that same night. He was growing weary of her charms while she struggled to keep up with the energetic lifestyle, both carnally and otherwise, of a man in his 20s. He voiced frustration over Ellen avoiding venues where we performed. Word had spread that the band was back in action, drawing crowds wherever we played. Additionally, he was displeased to learn that Ellen had relinquished her rights to our property in the divorce and had been planning to move into my house. I had suspected him of gold digging, but his audacity was staggering. Perhaps he was unaware of our prenuptial agreement, a precautionary measure devised by Ellen's father, who harbored suspicions about any man's intentions toward his daughter. I had readily agreed to it, as I had no intention of causing her injury. The agreement stipulated that if either of us left the marriage for greener pastures, we forfeited all rights to the family assets, leaving them entirely to the other party. It was likely Ellen remembered this agreement, which might explain why she proposed such an amicable divorce settlement. After Boy Toy sent her packing, Ellen spent the following night in tears, pouring her heart out to the kids over the phone. I sympathized with her plight, but I had already gone through my 3 days of mourning for my marriage and was now free to offer support without being emotionally entangled. However, the kids weren't pleased with my detached attitude. They still saw me as unattached and believed I should welcome their mom back into the family home, at least temporarily, to help her get back on her feet. But I disagreed. Taking her in would mean dealing with the inevitable mood swings that came with menopause, a challenge I had already experienced during our marriage. Adding to that her feelings of rejection by Boy Toy, the humiliation of crawling back to me, and potential guilt over leaving me in the first place, was not something I was eager to handle on a daily basis. I was enjoying my newfound simplicity and independence too much to disrupt it. As days turned into weeks, the kids toned down their insistence to a more reasonable request for assistance, and I obliged by allowing them access to the storage unit I had rented for our furniture and belongings, which were too valuable to discard. Until Ellen found a small apartment of her own, I even lent them the band's truck to help with the move. With the new school year in full swing and a busy schedule for the band, I rarely crossed paths with Ellen. Although we both taught in the same district, we worked in different school buildings, so our encounters were infrequent, and when they did happen, I barely took notice of her. I had become a popular topic of discussion in the rumor mill, perhaps due to the frequent appearances of my Harley or sports car, or maybe it was my increased activity level spilling over into school life, or simply my newfound status as an eligible bachelor. But rumors held little significance for me. The band was thriving, my barbecue parties were legendary for their good times, and I never lacked female companionship. Content as could be, I found myself not missing married life in the slightest. Flying to France for Thanksgiving was a long-held dream of mine, coinciding with the release of Beaujolais Nouveau. And this year, Thanksgiving fell early enough for the calendar to align perfectly. As I packed my bags, I was taken aback when my son called the night before. I left, inviting me to a Thanksgiving dinner at Ellen's. He seemed genuinely upset when I explained I already had plans, but he quickly pivoted to suggesting that we host a family Christmas instead. He and his girlfriend offered to handle the cooking, with the condition that I provide the venue. He mentioned that all 3 kids would be coming into town and expressed their desire for a special day to reminisce. I agreed to the Christmas gathering on the condition that Ellen understood she wasn't welcome to bring a date, and that I would dedicate my attention to the kids. I was surprised to learn from my son that Ellen wasn't dating at all and was actually quite lonely. Despite this revelation, I didn't delve further into her love life. My primary concern was ensuring a harmonious family gathering without any awkwardness caused by a new romantic interest. I extended the invitation for them to stay at my home for as long as they wished, preferring that all the kids stay together rather than in a hotel. However, my son expressed concern that Ellen might feel uncomfortable leaving while everyone else stayed on. After mulling over his words, I realized that this reunion would be the first time our family could all be together since the kids moved out. I acknowledged that Ellen belonged there too. So invite her to stay as well, I told my son, but she'll have to accept sleeping in the guest room. I don't think it would be wise for her to stay in her old room. If you bring guests, they'll need to share your room or find accommodations elsewhere. Thanks, Dad. This means a lot to all of us, my son replied gratefully. Christmas that year fell on a Saturday, and the festivities began on Thursday night as everyone arrived. My daughter and her fiancé flew in from Australia, while my son and his girlfriend drove in from Boston, picking up my youngest, who was in college there. Ellen arrived about 10 minutes before them, and I observed her sitting in her car, seemingly nervous. Witnessing them all gather in the front yard, hugging and kissing, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sentimentality for the first time since emerging from my 3 days of mourning. As the 6 of them entered through the front door, they were met with a warm and welcoming atmosphere. It occurred to me that neither my daughter nor my ex-wife had set foot in the house since I remodeled it, so there was an element of surprise in their homecoming. Yet I had adorned the house with Christmas decorations much in the same fashion as we had done for years. Candles, nutcrackers, and centerpieces adorned the space, albeit now on my new furniture. The Christmas tree, adorned with old ornaments collected from vacations and handmade ones from the kids' art classes, stood proudly in its customary place. I had added a fireplace during the renovations, and its warm glow added to the festive ambience. The aroma of pine, crackling fire, and mulled cider enveloped the room. Plates of cookies and fudge dotted every available surface, and the table was set with the fine china that had been passed down from Ellen's grandmother as our wedding gift many years ago. It was evident that I had transformed our house into my home, and it was more than ready to host Christmas for my family. Despite everything that had transpired, they were undeniably my family. The kids, though grown, were still my flesh and blood, and despite our divorce, Ellen had held the key to my heart for most of my adult life. There was a flurry of excitement as they explored the house. I had restored the kids' bedrooms to almost exactly how they remembered, with minor updates such as toning down the hot pink in my daughter's room to a softer pastel shade. I had replaced their old single beds with comfortable queen sets while preserving their childhood desk and dresser sets with new headboards to match. The spacious guest room had been converted into a studio, complete with a drafting table by the window for painting and ample space for musical instruments, amps, and recording gear. I'd also expanded one side of the ground floor, transforming a small library into a large room with a TV and pool table. The living room had been meticulously arranged around the new fireplace, now adorned with brand new Christmas stockings, one for each of us, including Ellen. The sight of the stockings sparked an instant rush of nostalgia in the kids. With mischievous grins, they darted towards their stockings, and in that moment, it was as if time itself reversed, and they became carefree children again, eagerly diving into the holiday spirit. The older two, with a touch of maturity, retrieved their partner's stockings as well, each recounting cherished memories the stockings evoked. Our tradition had always been to lovingly fill the stockings with small, inexpensive gifts and treats before moving on to the main presents under the tree. Soon the air was filled with the sound of laughter and the rustling of wrappers as they nibbled on cookies and chocolates, donned silly novelty socks, and reveled in the joy of Christmas morning. "Dad, your stocking is empty. We didn't know, so we didn't bring anything to stuff it," they exclaimed. Taking my stocking from the mantel, I peered inside. "No, my dear, you did fill it. You're all here reminiscing, laughing, and playing. You're filling it now with the essence of Christmas. You're filling it with love." With hugs and kisses exchanged, we wished each other a Merry Christmas. Ellen lingered in our embrace a bit longer than expected, but it felt natural, and for a moment, it was as if we were still one big happy family. As the kids realized there were probably presents under the tree, the excitement of childhood Christmases flooded back. Gifts were exchanged, the feast was enjoyed, and after the dishes were cleared, the guitars came out for our customary Christmas jam session. As the night grew late, we began to retire to our respective sleeping quarters. Ellen moved towards the hall closet to retrieve her coat. "Thank you for being so kind to me today. I really appreciate spending Christmas Day with you and the kids. I know I have myself to blame, but of all the things I gave up, I miss the family time the most. Well, the kids are all grown and on their own now. This gathering would be just as rare even if we were still together," I responded, acknowledging the bittersweet reality of our situation. "I understand, but I also miss the quality time we used to share, just the two of us. You know, the time when it was just us as a couple. I suppose I'm finally apologizing to you. I really messed up what could have been a great life for both of us. Don't be so hard on yourself. We always encouraged our kids to pursue their dreams, to find happiness, and you did just that. We still have fulfilling lives, they're just different now." She gave me a disbelieving look. "So you're telling me you don't value what we had? After today, you don't feel any nostalgia, regret for what we've lost?"
"Ellen, we had today, and it was wonderful."
"What exactly do you think we've lost?" "We lost each other. I lost you, and I'll never forgive myself for it. And it seems like you couldn't care less." Tears streamed down her face. I wrapped my arm around her, and she broke down completely. I had already shed my tears when she first arrived, but I felt a pang of sadness seeing her like this on Christmas Day. When she calmed down, I reminded her of our college days when she had ended things with me. She had been worried that things were getting too serious too quickly and needed time to decide if she truly wanted a lifelong commitment to one person. I recounted how hurt I had been when she left, but that I couldn't bear to be with someone who wasn't fully committed to me. I explained how I had given myself a mourning period after our marriage ended and had emerged ready to embrace life again. Today, she was a beautiful part of my life, and for that, I was grateful. I remained composed, which helped calm her tears. I asked her to spend the night, set up the studio bed, and provided her with one of my t-shirts and a robe. Returning upstairs after securing the house, I heard her crying, doubting she would sleep. Nonetheless, I slept soundly. The following day felt like an extension of Christmas, and I was delighted when we urged her to stay the entire weekend. We avoided discussing our past while the kids were around, but I noticed familiar expressions from our marriage in Ellen's eyes. There were the "I love you so much" and "you're wonderful" smiles. I even responded to a few silent requests for hugs and kisses. We seemed to understand each other as we did when we were married. At meals, she poured her coffee, and I added just the right amount of milk. I buttered my pancakes, and she applied the perfect amount of maple syrup. We completed each other's sentences. However, we slept in separate rooms. After the children departed together, leaving my daughter to visit Boston with the boys and then head to Vermont for skiing, Ellen and I were alone in our jointly owned home. I tended to the fire while she opened a bottle of wine. We sat and conversed, reminiscing, joking, and eventually delving into serious matters. I acted foolishly, wrongly, and cruelly. I understand I can never fully make amends, and I don't expect your forgiveness, but I do want to apologize. I hope we can at least be friends again. You weren't just my husband, you were my best friend, my confidant, my most trusted ally, my partner in mischief, and I miss every part of you dearly. I smiled at her, and the floodgates opened. Ellen spoke eloquently, recounting how she fell into boredom, realizing now that she had pushed me away to create the passionless void we both endured. She described the excitement of meeting a flattering younger man and the temptation of a clandestine affair. She admitted to demonizing me to justify her actions, portraying me as the villain when she was the one behaving monstrously. Her narrative oscillated between the thrill of betrayal and anger that I didn't fight for her, that I seemed indifferent and allowed her to slip away. She confessed to feeling jealous of my life when I bounced back and resumed the lifestyle I enjoyed before we met, especially when she saw another woman riding on the back of my Harley. Her jealousy turned to rage as she witnessed me with different women, each offering something she perceived as superior to what she had given me. Her emotional state plummeted after the divorce was finalized, discovering that her younger lover had a pattern of dating married women until they were single, then discarding them. It seemed he enjoyed spending their husband's money. Ever since his father, a traditionalist who strongly disapproved of his son's affair-breaking habits, disowned him and cut him off from his trust funds. She struggled to find another prospect after the breakup. It appeared that the eligible men her age were either already taken or unwilling to commit to a woman who had cheated on her loyal first husband. While there were plenty of men willing to buy her drinks, dance with her, or spend the night, there were no lasting options. Younger men were content to date her. After all, she maintained her attractiveness and allure when she chose to engage. However, they weren't interested in a long-term relationship with someone going through menopause. Starting a family under those circumstances posed a challenge. I listened to her vent until she ran out of steam. I poured us both another glass of wine and handed hers to her with a smile. Well, from what you've told me, I suppose you made some pretty foolish choices, but you don't owe me anything. As I mentioned before, you pursued your desires, and I loved you enough to let you go. I wished I could have captured her expression at that moment. It was clear she hadn't anticipated my response being tied to my love for her. I forgave you almost immediately. How could I hold you in a marriage when you wanted out? I couldn't keep you confined or restricted. If I had forbidden something, you would have simply hidden it from me and proceeded anyway. Though your note may have seemed harsh initially, looking back, it streamlined things for us. We avoided property disputes and didn't have to worry about custody since our children were grown. I should thank you for that. So, I'm no longer your husband, and it may take some time before you consider me a best friend or advisor. Trust is certainly an issue for me, but if you're willing to trust my advice, that label is yours to decide. Partner in crime might be a bit too romantic for where we are now, but how about we just call ourselves friends? Tears welled up in her eyes as she melted into my embrace. She decided to stay another night. But no, let's not go there. We slept separately. We simply had a lot to catch up on. It seemed we were comfortable sharing the parenting role again. The following day, she went home to prepare for a New Year's trip to join the kids in Boston. I had gigs lined up all week. It's a highly lucrative time for musicians. The added benefit was that my focus was on my music, and Ellen hardly crossed my mind. With the start of the new school term after New Year's, my schedule left little room to see Ellen. Our paths crossed next at an in-service conference in April. We ended up sitting beside each other and found ourselves sharing a table for lunch. We had a delightful conversation centered around my daughter's upcoming marriage in Australia. It seemed we were reverting to our roles as friends. Towards the end of the lunch, she thanked me for treating her well, both that day and at Christmas. She expressed happiness that we could move forward as friends and then asked me for a favor. She blushed, hesitated a bit, and finally stammered out a request to go for a ride on the Harley one Saturday. I responded eagerly, affirming that Sunday was forecasted to be warm and beautiful with no prior commitments. I suggested we take a ride up north, stop for a pleasant lunch, and relish some time in the fresh air. She was cheerful and animated. Memories of her on the bike with me when we were younger flooded back. Those days always ended with passionate moments inspired by hours of her holding on to me from behind as we rode, her hands exploring my chest and, well, you can imagine without further detail. She always joked about the next time we'd go for a ride with something powerful between her legs, and the motorcycle was nice too. I wasn't sure if I could resist her, and I was right. I couldn't. We rode up to the falls, and I felt her hands wander. We hiked to the top of the falls and followed the long trail through the woods back down to the bike. We stopped in a quaint little town and wandered the streets, browsing antique shops. It was the type of day I typically detested, but spending time with this woman, who I had always seen as beautiful in every way, made it enjoyable. Lunch was delightful. By dinner time, we had returned south and stopped at a charming seafood dock for dinner. With candlelight, delicious food, and the gentle lapping of waves at the dock, it was evident she was being treated to a special evening. I took her home, to my home, our home. I took her to bed, our bed, my bed. Yes, we made love. This time, it seemed we were now sharing the role of lovers together. We continued seeing each other for dinner and a movie the following week, and yes, we made love again. We even had lunch together a couple of times. However, we never discussed where our relationship was heading. The idea of exclusivity didn't cross either of our minds. Our daughter's wedding was approaching rapidly. We had meticulously gone over all the details, and I had proudly covered all the expenses without complaint. The band had made good money playing at festivals. We had paid off the mortgage while still married, had minimal credit card debt, and I had a stable, full-time job with a top-tier salary and no dependents to support. While I wasn't swimming in wealth, I was comfortable and had savings in the bank. The only detail we hadn't shared was our travel plans. We had each made separate arrangements, but we were both staying at the hotel where all the guests would gather. When we compared notes, we realized we were booked on the same flight. I invited her to meet me at my house and share the car I had hired to take us to the airport. On the day of the trip, Ellen arrived early. I had barely rinsed out the coffee pot and started the dishwasher with the breakfast dishes when the car pulled into the driveway. Our driver swiftly took us to JFK. After checking our bags curbside, we headed into the terminal together. Since there weren't many direct flights from JFK to Sydney that day, the check-in counter wasn't crowded, and we joined the line together. I stepped up after Ellen, and the counter attendant asked why I hadn't used the shorter line for first-class passengers. Although I had purchased a first-class ticket due to the long flight duration, I typically opted for cheaper fares and hadn't realized the benefits included express check-in. The ticket agent found it amusing and directed me to the first-class lounge. Ellen was waiting for me there, and we cleared security together before heading to the lounge. At the desk, I checked in, and the attendant didn't question Ellen's entry with a coach ticket but offered to upgrade her to first class to sit next to me. Call me sentimental or whatever else you like, but something about flying halfway around the world with the mother of my daughter to attend her wedding in. First-class seats that reclined into beds while she cramped in coach with no legroom just didn't sit right with me. When we boarded the plane by Rose, I made her wait with me. Initially annoyed and worried about losing her seat to a standby passenger, she began to work up a fuss. I explained that I had checked her in when we arrived at the lounge, diffusing her irritation. Of course, any remaining annoyance vanished completely when she was seated beside me in first class, and I presented the mother of the bride rationale. Her mood shifted to a degree that had me briefly entertaining thoughts of joining the Mile High Club. But don't be absurd, dear reader. Public displays of affection aren't my style, especially not in the confines of an airplane lavatory. We landed in Sydney, and the week was pure magic. We toured, visited, and best of all, witnessed my daughter embark on her own marriage journey. I can't express enough how proud I felt uttering my sole line, "Her mother and I do," as I gave her away after walking her down the aisle. At the reception, I escorted Ellen and savored the customary dances. Among the evening's highlights was when her brothers and I joined the band for a spirited rendition of All American Girl, our musical tribute to our little girl. Following the festivities, Ellen, the boys, and I convened in the hotel lounge. One of them cut to the chase. "So, what's going on with you two?" "Nothing new, sweetie," Ellen replied. "Your dad and I are simply embracing our roles as your parents. We've moved past our past and are relishing life. Is that all right with you?" "Yeah, Mom, it just seems like more than that. It seems like you're getting close again. Maybe even, I don't know, getting back together?" "Honey, I'm not oblivious. I had a moment of insanity a while back and made a foolish mistake." "All right, I was foolish then, incredibly foolish. I own up to that and I accept the consequences. Your dad and I have discussed it, and what he said is true. Just like we always taught you, I made a decision. I left the relationship and I accept the consequences." The boys turned to me for input. Having nothing further to contribute, I sat there with a smile, savoring a delightful local Australian ale. "Come on, Dad," Mom answered the question. "Do we get to hear from you?" "Boys, you should be grateful we didn't spend the week here hurling hurtful remarks at each other. I hear that's what divorced couples often do at events like this. Beyond that, I believe your inquiry generally delves into my romantic life, which is off limits. Didn't I teach you not to kiss and tell? So why would I?" "But Dad, you love Mom. It's obvious to all of us. And we're both old enough to understand when a girl says she wants to be just friends. So, without giving me nightmares and unpleasant mental images of your love life, just tell us, are you and Mom more than just friends?" "Son, given our history, if we're friendly, it will always surpass mere friendship. She's the love of my life, the mother of my children, and the greatest friend I've ever had. It's one of those things humans can't simply switch on or off. Beyond that, I can't provide an answer because that part of our life story has yet to be written." We chatted a bit longer before retiring to our respective rooms. Just as I had slipped into my pajamas, there was a knock on the door. It was Ellen. I welcomed her in, and we climbed into bed. She expressed gratitude for the first-class upgrade, and before I could catch my breath, she began thanking me for the wonderful week we'd had. She thanked me for approaching my daughter's wedding as a team and for what I had told the boys in the lounge. Exhausted from the onslaught of gratitude, I could barely keep up. She stayed for breakfast, which I ordered from room service. The journey home felt like a dream. Upon arriving at my house, before she left, Ellen gave me a deep kiss. I want you to know that I'm here for you. Whatever you want, whenever you want. Somewhere along the line, I forgot why I loved you. Somewhere in the routine of being an adult, I forgot how much I loved you. Leaving you was the biggest mistake I could have made. I threw away the most precious thing I could ever have. Hurting you will always be the biggest regret of my life, and I wish I could turn back the clock. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, just let me know. Need a tennis partner? Call me. Need a roadie? Groupie? Backup singer? I'm your girl. Need a lover? I'm your woman. Whether it's having love made to me, using me, or making love to me, I'm there. Need a meal cooked? I'll do it. I'll clean, fold your laundry, do the dishes and windows. I'll never ask or expect exclusivity. I know I gave that up. But if you ever ask, the answer is yes. Friend, girlfriend, mistress, lover, wife, just ask. Thank you for being you. You're wonderful. And if you ever decide to settle down with someone else, count on me to let her know what she has and that she better make you happy, or I'll be waiting. That's really sweet of you, Ellen. I've been so happy that we've been able to reconnect. I'm just not sure I'm comfortable putting labels on us. I don't know where we're headed. I'm just glad we're on this journey together, at least part of the time. I've spent my whole life living with women and usually doing their bidding. First my mom and sister, then right after college, marrying you. I kind of enjoy living in a home where I determine the colors and clutter levels. I like cooking my own food the way I like it, and having the fridge stocked with my favorites. I love playing in the band, and I have to admit, having an open love-making life has been good for me. I don't plan on changing that anytime soon. Do you remember the note I wrote in response to your letter? Yes. You said I was right, thanked me, and said goodbye. You didn't. Or even sign it love. I meant every word in that note. You were right, we were stagnant and needed a change. The thank you and goodbye were sincere. Anything about love would have felt insincere and out of place. Anything else I could have said would have either been spiteful or made me seem like a pathetic beggar. I'm not good at that, so I wrote what needed to be said and left it at that. What needs to be written now? Tom, not a thing. I've shown you everything you need to know. Yes, you have. You've shown me that you care. You've shown me you still find me attractive, and hot even. You've shown me you want me. You stand by me where the children are concerned. You've shown you love me more than a casual lover, enough even to share dinner and breakfast. You enjoy my company enough to date me. You respect me and our history enough to upgrade me to first class, pay for our daughter's wedding completely without asking a cent from me, and declare to our sons that I'm the love of your life. The only thing that seems to be missing is a more full-time role, being your wife. I want you to know I understand that and will never press you on that topic. I know I gave that right away, but understand that if you ever choose to ask, the answer is yes in advance. And I'll be praying every day of my life for the chance to say it. With that, she kissed me goodnight. Sure, I considered what she said, but come on, let's be realistic. I may be whipped, but why settle for just one? I had everything I could want. My own home, grown children, financial security, an ex-wife dedicated to winning me back, who admitted she'd do anything, anytime, a fit body with all my hair, a successful band and a Harley, and a steady stream of women vying to ride on the back of my bike and join me for after-parties. Sure, I loved Ellen enough, and there was that idea of having someone to share my golden years with. But really? Maybe I'd change my mind when we hit 60, but not now. I didn't pen a Dear Jeff letter, so I didn't feel accountable for any consequences. I'd forgiven her, made amends, and my life was in order. So I dialed the number of that busty blonde who hopped on my Harley after the street festival and became my first post-divorce fling. She giggled when I asked if she was serious about never hearing from me again, assuring me she was okay and up for a rendezvous. She invited me over. Even as I revved up the Harley to head to her place, I knew someday I'd propose to Ellen again. But that day wasn't today.
Growing up, I always felt like life was steady and predictable. I had my routines, my home, and the things that made me feel secure. I valued that predictability until one night when my world changed in an unexpected way. It wasn't anything major, just a small disruption, but it marked the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything I thought I knew about myself. It started with a simple sound. The clattering of a trash bin knocked over in the middle of the night startled me awake. I was already annoyed, this had happened before, I figured it was the stray dogs again, but little did I know that this minor disturbance would lead me to meet two people who would disrupt my quiet life in unimaginable ways. I groggily made my way to the back door, club in hand, irritated by the all-too-familiar mess outside. For the third time that week, I'd been woken up by the sound of trash cans being knocked over. I was fed up with cleaning up someone else's problem. Why couldn't people keep their pets under control? While I understood the animals were probably hungry, it didn't ease my frustration. I cautiously opened the gate, ready to deal with the nuisance. As I neared the overturned garbage, I saw two shadowy figures standing by the mess, and my grip on the club tightened as they noticed me. "Please, sir, we're just hungry," one of them said. "We'll clean everything up. Don't hurt us." These weren't dogs. They were children. But they certainly seemed wild. It was dark, so I grabbed them by their collars and dragged them into the backyard under the security lights. I picked them up to get a better look. They were scruffy and dirty, dressed in oversized, ragged clothes and baseball caps. It was cold out, and I saw them shivering. "Did you two knock over my trash earlier this week?" I asked. They exchanged glances. "Yeah, you always throw out something like pizza or food," one of them replied. "I'm sorry we did this. We won't do it again. Just let us go. We'll clean everything up." "This won't do." I gripped their shirts tightly and led them inside. I brought them straight to the bathroom, pushed them in, and shut the door. "Don't come out until I'm back," I said. I went and grabbed some of my ex-wife's sweatpants, sweatshirts, clean socks, and big fluffy towels. When I returned, they had tried to open the window to escape. "You might like being dirty," I said, "but I doubt a hot shower will hurt you. There's soap and shampoo here. These are clean clothes and towels. Get undressed and get in the shower." "We don't like being dirty," the larger one growled. "We just don't have a shower as nice as yours." "Are you going to stand there the whole time? You probably think we'll steal something," I said. "Yeah, right," the kid snapped. "We're not going to steal your toilet paper. We're not thieves. What, are you some kind of creep, you into little girls?" I was shocked. Now that I looked closer, beneath all that dirt, they were definitely girls. I didn't realize you were girls. Just clean yourselves up and I'll get you something to eat. Come to the kitchen when you're done." I left them in the bathroom and headed to the kitchen. I opened the fridge and took stock. There was cold fried chicken, half a bowl of potato salad, a tray of veggies, some sandwich pastrami, and dill pickles. I split the chicken between two plates, 3 pieces each, and added a big scoop of potato salad. I put some veggies on a plate with dip, threw a few pickles on the side, and made pastrami sandwiches for each of them. I even added some chips for good measure. Hopefully, they'd like the Munster cheese, mayo, and mustard on their sandwiches. I heard the bathroom door creak open, followed by hushed whispers outside the kitchen. A minute later, 2 of the most beautiful girls I'd ever seen stepped into the room. They had long, jet-black hair, olive skin, and the brightest green, almond-shaped eyes I'd ever seen, along with high cheekbones and the cutest little noses. They looked like they were still in their early teens, maybe around 11 or 12. It was amusing to see them in Brianna's clothes. She's tall, and they were tiny, with their sleeves and pant legs rolled up, looking a bit like tramps. "Have a seat," I said, offering them a chair. "Do you want Coca-Cola, or I have juice or milk?" They both asked for milk. "My name is McKay North," I said as I poured the milk and placed it in front of them. "What are your names?" "My name's Maggie," said the older one, short for Margaret. "This is Stokely." "Can we really eat all this?" she asked. "You can have more if you want sandwiches," I replied. "But I'm not cooking at 2 a.m. I'll make something in the morning." "No, this is great, thank you," Stokely said, while Maggie eyed me warily. "What do you want from us? We don't do any dirty stuff," Maggie said suspiciously. I laughed. "Neither do I. If either of you had designs on my virtue, you'd be disappointed." They didn't seem to get my humor. "I'm not into little girls," I added. They didn't like being called little girls, but they started eating, and fast, like wolves. "Hey, slow down," I told them. "The chickens aren't going anywhere. They're dead, and the potatoes were never fast. You'll hurt your stomach." This made them giggle, and they started eating more slowly. "Where do you two live?" I asked. "There's an empty house at the end of the block," Maggie answered. "We found a mattress and some blankets, but we're afraid pill dependents might move in. Once they know it's empty, they will—" "How about sleeping in a warm, clean bed tonight?" I offered. They looked at me suspiciously again. "Not mine," I laughed. "I have 3 extra bedrooms. Well, they're mine too, but you know what I mean." They laughed nervously. "We don't have any money," Stokely said. "We can't pay you. We just collect cans, but we spend all our money on food." I'm not asking for money, I said. Did I say anything about you paying me? Why are you doing this? She asked. Why are you so kind to us, Mac? Call me Mac, I said. Everyone does. Why are you being so nice, Mac? Maggie pressed. I'm not trying to be cute, I told her. I'm a good guy. Just ask my mom. This brought smiles to their faces, and I liked it. I made a mental note to get them to smile more often. If I were in your shoes, I'd want someone to be kind to me, I said. They seemed to be thinking it over. Can I have some of these chips? Stokely asked. I pushed the bag toward them, and they both reached in while continuing to eat their sandwiches. I finished my own and noticed they were still hungry, so I poured them more milk. They drank it all and cleaned their plates, even the vegetables. They must have been starving. Go to bed, I told them. Each of you has your own bathroom. There are toothbrushes, combs, and other things like that. Aspirin, stomach medicine, toothpaste, and dental floss are in the first aid kits. If you need anything else, just ask. Can we lock the doors? Maggie asked. Yes, but if I knock, you have to open them within a reasonable time, I said. They exchanged a glance. Then Maggie's green eyes lit up. He thinks we'll steal something, she told Stokely. Don't worry, Mac, we won't take anything. It's okay if you don't trust us. We don't really trust you either. I had to laugh. Fair enough. We have mutual distrust. But you'll soon learn you can trust me. I almost never hurt beautiful girls. This brought another set of dazzling smiles. They followed me down the hallway to their rooms. I heard the locks click and smiled to myself. As I returned to bed, I lay awake for a while wondering what had happened to these girls. Why were they digging through my trash? Why were they alone? Where was their family? I planned to get some answers in the morning. I was getting dressed when I heard the floorboards creaking in the hall. I cracked the door open and saw them sneaking toward the living room. I figured they were about to leave, so I stepped out. They froze. Girls, are you ready for breakfast? I asked. They looked at each other. Maybe we should just leave, Maggie said. You're not going to lock us up or anything, are you? You mean make you stay? I asked. They glanced at each other again and nodded. No, I won't force you to stay, I said. That's not how I do things. But I'd love for you to have breakfast with me. They looked at each other once more. Will you let us go after? Stokely asked. If that's what you want, I said. Though I was hoping you'd spend the day with me, but if you have somewhere else to be, that's okay. Yeah, we've got to meet our stockbroker, Maggie quipped, her face lighting up like a Christmas tree. So, what's for breakfast? No, what are you going to feed us? She corrected herself. Are you an English teacher or something? Actually, yes, I said. I teach English literature at the university. Cool, Stokely said. We don't go to school. Too busy. But you're having breakfast, right? I was thinking waffles and bacon. Sound good? It did. So we headed to the kitchen. They got out the waffle iron while I mixed the batter, and they made waffles while I fried 2 pounds of bacon. I'm kind of a syrup snob. I'm a coffee snob, too. I let Maggie turn the bacon while I ground the coffee beans. Everything came together nicely, and we had real maple syrup and waffles. They horrified me by asking for coffee creamer, but I kept some around for the barbarians and Brianna, and they loved the vanilla flavor. We ate all the bacon, and they each had 3 waffles. Stick with me, girls, and in a week you'll be as fat as toads, I joked. They laughed, and it was the best sound I'd ever heard. Then they gulped down milk like hungry calves. My pantry was definitely going to need restocking. So, tell me about Maggie and Stokely, I asked. What's going on with you two? Why are you digging through people's trash for food? We took our coffee into the living room, and they shared their sad story. Their father had been a car mechanic. He lost his job when they were young, which led him to start drinking and abusing them. Their mother eventually divorced him, and they never saw him again. The economy in Detroit was falling apart, making it hard to find work. Their mom drove a taxi to support them, but one night she picked up the wrong passenger. He stabbed her for the little money she had and left her to bleed to end of life. The girls were put into foster care, but the foster homeowner began maltreating them. They ran away and lived on the streets for 3 months. Their last name was Steele, and they constantly worried about freezing to end of life, being maltreated or eliminated, and where their next meal would come from. I sat quietly after they finished their story. My heart broke for them. I wondered how many more kids like them were out there, living the same story. This was probably more common than I had ever realized. I wondered if they'd let me help them, and how I even could. It seemed unlikely that children's services would let them stay with me. A single man housing 2 young girls? It sounded like something a carnivore would dream up, and I doubted social services would allow it. They interrupted my thoughts. "Mac, are you married?" Stokely asked. "I was," I replied, "but my ex thought I wasn't ambitious enough. She's a hotshot lawyer and has been all over. There was no room for marriage in her life." "What a witch," Maggie commented. I laughed. "She's actually a really good person. She didn't cheat or anything, and we're still close friends. We both agreed we should never have gotten married. We were too young and too dumb." "How old are you?" Stokely asked. "I'm 28, I told her. "How old are you?" "I'm 11, and she's 13, Stokely answered. "What are you doing today?" I asked. "What are we doing today?" She corrected herself. "Yes, what you said." "We're going to talk," I said, "and I'll introduce you to someone." I opened the garage door, and suddenly a mass of fur came bounding in. He spotted our guests and leaped onto the sofa, settling on their laps and licking them with his big pink tongue. "This is Granville," I said, "but I call him Grandma." The girls burst into giggles as the dog covered them with licks. At 130 pounds, they could barely move him. "Lie down, Grandma," I commanded, and he reluctantly settled on their legs. "He's huge," Stokely laughed, stroking his head. "What kind of dog is this? He's striped like a tiger." "He's a bull mastiff," I explained. "That's why he has that brindle color." "He looks like he could bite our faces off," Maggie said. "Yes, he could, but he won't. He's gentle with my friends. He sees you here being kind, so he loves you. If you were threatening, he'd get aggressive. Now that he knows you, he won't let anyone be mean to you. If I yell at you, he won't like it. He protects the people he cares about." Stokely slid down and wrapped her arms around the dog's neck as he licked her hand. "I love him," she said. "He's so wrinkly and cute." "Does he live in the garage?" she asked. "No, he lives in the house," I replied. "He got sick yesterday, so I put him outside to avoid a mess." "What made him sick?" Stokely asked. "He eats things he shouldn't. Sticks, bugs, dead stuff." "You name it. He seems fine now, though." "Gross," Maggie said. "He licked my face." "Yeah, he's a bit disgusting, but he's my buddy. He'll be your buddy too if you let him. We should take him for a walk." I grabbed his leash, and Maggie wanted to lead him. But really the dog led her, dragging her a few yards ahead of Stokely and me. Stokely slipped her small hand into mine, and I looked down at her. She smiled up at me. She was so beautiful. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Of course, sweetheart," I said. "I like holding hands with pretty girls." She blushed a little, but didn't let go. We walked for a couple of miles, and by the time we got back, Granville was panting and drooling. It was cold out, but he didn't seem to care. We drank more coffee and talked for the rest of the day. Eventually, I asked them if they'd let me help them. "What can you do?" Maggie asked. "I'm not sure," I admitted, "but I could talk to Brianna. She's a lawyer, though a different kind. Maybe she'll have some ideas." "Is this the same witch?" Maggie asked. "Maggie, stop calling her that. She's not a witch. Do you trust me?" I asked. They exchanged looks and nodded. "Yeah, I guess," Stokely said. "You've been really kind to us." "Okay, let's call her and see if she can come over. I think you'll like her. Just give her a chance." Brianna was busy, but agreed to come over for dinner. Bri is a tall, stunning redhead, and even though she doesn't realize it, she's incredibly sexy. When she walked in, I could tell the girls were impressed. She kissed me until my toes curled, then hugged both girls. "You've replaced me?" she teased, winking at them. "No, Bri, you're irreplaceable," I joked. She beamed, clearly pleased. I explained to the girls that Bri and I were still good friends, and we were. We had a friends with benefits kind of relationship. We still had great sex, sometimes once a week, sometimes more. Occasionally, she'd stay with me for a week, and we'd have sex like rabbits. But she didn't have time for a husband, and I doubted she ever would. We loved each other, but we couldn't make marriage work. As friends, we were great, but as a married couple, we fought constantly. "So, who are your new girlfriends?" she asked, smiling at them. I saw they were dazzled. "I'm Maggie, and this is Stokely." "Nice to meet you," Bri said. "You know this guy's dangerous, right?" "Not to us," Stokely said. "But he could be to someone who's his enemy. He has a club, and a very big dog." Bri nudged Granville with her boot, and he grumbled in his sleep. "Hey, big guy." She knelt down and hugged him. "Miss me?" He rolled his eyes but didn't have the energy to lift his head. "What's going on, Mac?" she asked. "What did you need to talk about?" "Not that I mind coming over for dinner. He's a great cook, girls, if you can get him motivated." I think he made lamb chops, Maggie said. We've never had anything like this before. Well, sounds like I'm in for a treat, but seriously, what's the big deal? She asked again. During dinner, I explained. We need your help, Bree, I said. We don't know anything about legal stuff. The girls are orphans. Their dad might be alive, but no one knows where he is. He abandoned them and their mom was eliminated. They ended up in foster care where some creep started maltreating them. They ran away and have been living on the streets. I found them digging through my trash, and now we're trying to figure out how to keep them from going back to that life. She looked at me for a moment. You want them, don't you? She said, exhaling. Jesus, Mac, you've always wanted kids. And because I didn't give you any, you want them, don't you? I blushed. Yeah, I kind of do. What do you think, Bree? What's the best way to handle this? I don't think it's possible, she said. No family court is going to give you 2 young girls. You're a single guy. It's a disaster waiting to happen. They won't allow it. I looked at the girls, and their wide eyes were on me. What? I asked. They exchanged glances and suddenly burst into tears, running up to hug me. You wanted to keep us? Stokely sobbed. I can't believe it. I never thought we'd find anyone. Anyone. She couldn't finish through the tears. I held them tight. Yes, girls, I did think about it. You need someone to look after you, and I need someone to look after me. I thought we could figure this out together. Their small bodies trembled as they clung to me. I looked at Bree, helpless, as tears streamed down her face. She glanced from the girls to me. Damn it, Mac. Look what you've done to me. Just when I think I've got you figured out, you surprise me. What am I going to do with you? She had a strange expression, like she was seeing me in a new light. Give me a few days to think. Girls, you're coming with me. You can't stay here with Mac. It'll ruin everything if anyone finds out. Mac, we're taking Grandma too. I can't stay home without him, and you'll have to look after the girls. She whisked them and the dog out the door like a whirlwind and into her Mercedes. I'll call you, she said. Over the next 2 weeks, she called me for about 30 seconds 3 times, but I didn't see her or the girls. Then on a Friday morning, she called and asked to meet for dinner at Alfonso's, a little Italian place in Pontiac that we frequented. When I arrived, she was already at the bar, with guys hovering around her. The moment she saw me, she jumped up, leaving them in the dust. We walked to our usual booth, but this time she sat next to me instead of across the table, which was unusual. We ordered, and she stayed quiet for a bit. Finally, she said, You know I love you, right, Mac? Yes, and I love you too, I replied. I'm not talking about loving your mom or anything like that. I'm in love with you, Mac. I always have been, ever since that day at Cedar Point. You're the only man I've ever loved or will ever love, she said. I trust you completely. I love everything about you, except the part where we were married. You know I need to be free. No commitments, no baggage, no ties. I love my job and my life, but I don't love them more than I love you, and I don't have to choose. You're as faithful as Grandma. We've got an understanding. I don't sleep with anyone but you, never have. You always got that about me, which is why what I'm about to say is going to sound crazy. Ooh, I joked. Sounds like I'm in for a shock. She gave me a look. Yes, you are. Will you marry me, Mac? I nearly choked on my wine. Getting wine in your lungs is not ideal. Once I recovered, I just sat there stunned, my mouth open. Stop being an idiot and answer me, she barked. Hell no, I finally managed. Why, Bree, we make each other miserable. In a month, we'll be at each other's throats. What's wrong with how things are now? Nothing, she admitted. This isn't about us. It's about the sweetest, most adorable girls on the planet. Mac, I'm completely in love with them. You wrecked my life by inviting me over that night. They're desperate to see you. Every night, they beg and cry to come see you. But I'm not giving them up. I've never been happier than I am with them, and no judge would give us custody. Not to me, not to you, not to either of us alone. But if we were married, they'd give them to us in a heartbeat. So I need them. And if I need them, I need you. If you want them, you'll have to deal with me too. Can we do this, Mac? I doubt it, I told her. You're as bad as me. You come home drunk, you're never on time for anything except work, and half the time you don't come home at all. Bree, we've been through this. I know, but what if things are different now? I can't wait to come home to them. I always call when I'm running late, and since they've been with me, I only have 1 glass of wine a night. I didn't know I could feel this way. Marry me, Mac. Give me a chance. We should talk this over, I said. Then talk. What are we doing here? You think I'm joking around? Tell me what's going on. Should I start? I signaled the waiter for more wine. Go ahead. What drives me crazy about you is your need to control me, she said. You have to know every detail. Where I am, who I'm with, what I'm doing, when I'll be home. You're paranoid. If you could just stop trying to control me, we'd still be married. But you can't help it. You know you're the only man I've ever cared about, right? Yeah, I do, I said. It used to drive me nuts. I was always worried you'd find someone else and leave me. That's never going to happen, she promised. I've never even considered another man since the day I met you. Sure, I go to dinners and dances with clients and colleagues, but that's just what I do. No one has touched me, and no one ever will. Do you believe me? Yes, and it's the same for me. I trust you, Bree. I know you'll never hurt me. I've always been in love with you, and I think you feel the same way. We were comfortable where we were. Well, I'm not comfortable anymore, she said. Those girls need a family. I love them almost as much as I love you, more than my job. And I want to be part of their lives. The only way that happens is if we do this together. Will you give me a chance, Mac? Will you marry me so we can be a family? I'll never have kids of my own. I'm too selfish for that. But these girls, we can take care of them. Marry me, and I'll make you happier than you've ever been. Okay, clearly you've had time to think about this, I said. Give me a little time too, okay? She looked at her watch. You got 20 minutes, she said. Wait, what? Do I have a deadline? I asked. Yeah, the girls are waiting outside. They'll be here in 10 minutes, and after a quick walk with Grandma, a car will pick us up and take us home. We quickly finished our food and stepped outside. A limo was waiting, but the girls were nowhere in sight. The driver mentioned they were walking the dog. He didn't seem too happy about it, probably not a fan of dog drool on the seats. After a few minutes, I saw the girls hurrying toward us. Let's go, Maggie said as they approached. Some guy was watching us and Grandma doesn't like him. He growled at him. I looked down the street and saw a young man walking our way. He looked about 20, with tattoos, piercings, a knit cap, and a hoodie. His sagging pants barely stayed on. He probably thought he looked intimidating. What are you staring at? He snapped at me. Nothing. We're just leaving, I replied. It's all yours. Nice jacket, fancy car, pretty women, he sneered. Looks like you've got some cash. The guy was nuts. I stood a good 8 inches taller than him and outweighed him by at least 100 pounds. No beer belly either. You better move along, kid, I told him. My dog really doesn't like you. He got about 4 feet from us. I'm not scared of any dog, he said. How much cash you got on you? He reached under his jacket and I caught a glimpse of metal. I kicked him square in the chest, sending him flying backward. A weapon fell out of his pants. Maggie lost her grip on Granville's leash as he lunged. The guy managed to protect his face with his arm, but I heard the crunch as Granville broke his forearm. He screamed, and Granville shredded his sleeve. Granville, down, I commanded. He backed off, sitting by my side. The guy writhed on the ground as I knelt next to him, Granville close by. Take it, Grandma, I said. Granville lunged forward, his jaws closing near the guy's neck. I think you're an idiot, I told him. What are you, some kind of moron? He nodded, fear etched on his face. Say it, I demanded. He didn't respond. Fight, Grandma, I ordered. The guy whimpered as blood trickled from where Granville's teeth grazed his neck. The sound of Granville's breathing filled the air. Say it, I repeated. I'm an idiot, he whispered. How much money do you have on you? I asked. Hand it over. He reached into his pocket, but Granville squeezed a little harder. Slowly, I warned. He pulled out a wad of cash and handed it to me. Let him go, Grandma, I said. Granville released him and the guy scrambled backward. I'll give you a 20-yard head start, I told him. Then I'm sending the dog after you. Better run fast. He bolted like a sprinter, but his pants fell halfway down. He stumbled, yanked them up with his good hand, and took off. You need a belt, I called after him. I turned back to the girls, who stood there with their mouths hanging open. I kicked the weapon into a storm drain. What? I asked. Bree was the first to speak. You're one nasty son of a witch, Mac. Remind us never to piss you off? The girls rushed over and I hugged them. Oh my God, Mac, Stokely whispered into my chest. I thought that guy was scary, but you didn't even break a sweat. You did it for us, didn't you? Well, nobody messes with my girls, I told her. He even left you a little something for your college fund. I handed her the cash. She counted it. $700. The guy must have mugged a few people recently. She split it with Maggie, and we got into the limo. As I leaned back, hugging Maggie, I noticed something. A van's coming for us, I said. I know, Bree replied. It's got some of our stuff. I raised an eyebrow. Yeah, I know I take a lot for granted, she laughed. Girls, I said, yes, Bree and I will get married again, and you'll stay with us. The girls gasped and screamed. Really? Maggie asked. She's really not a witch. You were right. We love Bree. She's been so good to us. We have all these new clothes, and she got us into this amazing school. We'll make you both proud. I promise. We know you will, sweetheart. Don't worry, Bree reassured them. I was still in shock, trying to form words, but nothing came out. Mac, you okay? Stokely asked. Bree chuckled. No, he's in full panic mode. His perfectly ordered world is about to get flipped upside down. His house is spotless, everything in perfect condition. Now he'll have underwear hanging in the shower, mixed up books, and drink rings on the coffee table, and it'll drive him crazy. I don't even know how he handles living with Granville. We'll just have to love him enough that he won't care about crumbs on the table. Think we can do that? I think we can, Maggie laughed. I'm not sure how, Bree started. But oh, he loves pretty girls. Just bat your eyelashes and he'll melt. He'll be mad at me, but you girls will have to love us through it. Wait a minute, I groaned. I didn't exactly agree to any of this. Bree, like her usual whirlwind self, was sweeping us all along. Do you love Bree? Stokely asked me. Yes, I love her, on the other side of the city, I joked. Yeah, but we all need to be together, Maggie said. They all burst out laughing at my remark, and I had to join them. The idea was absurd. How had I lost control so quickly? As usual, Brianna had just taken over. What started as my little attempt to help the girls had snowballed into a marriage and adoption plan. It was wild how small actions could send your life spiraling out of control. I thought it was reckless, and told Bree so. When we got back to my house, there was a flurry of activity. Movers were everywhere, hauling in piles of stuff and placing them in different rooms. To my surprise, loads of women's clothes started showing up in Maggie and Stokely's rooms. Where did all this come from? I asked Maggie as she zipped past. Bree took us shopping a few times, she said, before disappearing into her room. Bree popped her head out of my bedroom. Mac, do you ever throw anything away? You still have things from when we were married. I'm getting rid of this junk. I need drawer and closet space. I rushed over to rescue my high school Letterman jacket from the trash. Stop it, Brianna, I shouted. You can't just throw my stuff away. If I didn't want it, I wouldn't keep it. This is my house, and I'll throw your Boney back out if you don't stop. She stuck her head out and glared at me. Boney back, huh? She snorted. Then she grabbed my sleeve and dragged me into the bedroom, which looked like a tornado had hit it. In one swift move, she locked the door, pulled her dress over her head, and leaned over the bed. My breath caught. She wasn't wearing any underwear. We made love, and the next morning, I slept in until 10 o'clock. After stumbling into the shower, shaving, and freshening up, I finally felt somewhat human again. Bree was still asleep, her fiery red hair falling across her face as she lay on her stomach. Damn, her bum was incredible. I wandered into the living room and found Granville fast asleep, drooling all over a pile of my best shirts. I sighed, grabbed a glass of orange juice and a bun, and called to him. Come on, Grandma, let's get out of here. He lifted his head, rolled his eyes, and groaned as he got to his feet. We headed to the backyard, where he did his business before flopping down on my legs. The sun was warm, and I felt lazy, like a lizard basking in the heat. It was unusually warm for this time of year. The door opened, and Stokely stepped out with a glass of milk and a bun. Hello, Angel, I waved. Hi, Mac, she said, closing the door behind her. After a moment, she walked over to the glider where I was sitting. Is there room for me? She asked. I shifted over, and she curled up on my lap, resting her feet on the empty space. She sighed, took a bite of her bun, and looked at me with those big green eyes. Mac, she began, crumbs falling onto our laps. I interrupted. Finish eating, drink your milk, and then talk. She giggled and waited until her mouth was empty. Mac, she started again. If you adopt us, will you be our dad and Bree, our mom? Is that what you'd like? I asked. Oh, yes, she said. Bree would be the coolest mom ever. You're not exactly cool, but you're reliable. I love you, and I think you'd be the best dad in the world. I almost choked. Well, I muttered, being reliable is better than being cool, right? She laughed. I didn't mean it like that. I just mean Bree's like a force of nature, and you're like a mountain. You know she really, really loves you. She talks about you all the time. She's told us everything about you two. Do you love her? Yes, sweetie. But like you said, she's a force of nature. Loving her is like loving a thunderstorm or a wildfire. Mountains don't care about thunderstorms or wildfires, she said. Maggie looks a lot like her. I'm more like you. She pressed herself against my chest. I think we could be the calm at the center of their storm. She looked up at me. I want you to be our dad, Mac. I never thought we'd find someone like you. And Bree, too. Her voice cracked a little. We were so scared and alone. Mac, do you have room in your life for girls like us? I hugged her tighter. In my heart, Stokely, there's always been a place for you and Maggie. I've wanted someone like you to love me. For years, I didn't think I'd ever have this. Bree never showed any interest in having kids. And I think you girls turned her world upside down just like you did mine. I've seen the way she looks at you. It's like she woke up one day and realized she loves being a mother. You've changed her. You were right about her, she admitted. She's amazing. It's overwhelming sometimes. She makes a decision and you just get pulled along. I laughed. That's always been Bree. The first time I met her, I went to an amusement park with some college friends. She decided I was going to be her ride buddy. I'd actually gone because I liked another girl, but Bree dragged me away, and we never saw the rest of the group. We were 20, and I fell in love with her that day. She's like a virus. She invades your life and takes over. We had our first fight a month after we got married. What did you fight about? She asked. You're going to think this is silly. It was about shoes. She kept moving mine and putting hers in their place. I had to dig through her stuff to find mine. She thinks I'm obsessive. She's probably right. But is it too much to ask that she keep her shoes on her side of the closet? She exploded. And then I started driving her crazy, and she drove me crazy. I like to have a plan, and she's totally spontaneous. It's just who she is. I love that about her, but it also drives me nuts. She loves that I'm organized, but it drives her nuts. And those differences just kept clashing. Stokely giggled. Maggie and I fight about stuff like that too. She's always losing things, and then she just decides on the spur of the moment what we're going to do. I think we need to change a little, Mac. We need to go with the flow more. But they need to change too. They need to understand we like things in their place. Do you think we can figure this out? I don't know, I admitted. Bree and I never had a reason to try. Our relationship is weird. I love her more now than when we were married, and I think she feels the same. But she's not one to talk about it. She just does things. We're closer now than we ever were when we were married. I like her better now. Back then I loved her, but we were always angry. We got to a point where we didn't need to change, but I think we were too immature and selfish. Maybe you and Maggie made us realize what we were missing. The idea of being a family is exciting, but also terrifying. What if we screw it up? We could lose everything. I hate that kind of risk. I know, but sometimes you have to take a chance, she said. You can't get anything good without risking that it might go wrong. I hugged her, and she snuggled against me. You're the wisest 11-year-old I've ever met, I said. I'll be 12 next month, she replied. We finished the bun and headed back home. The others were still asleep, so we took Grandma for a walk. By the time we returned, the sleepyheads were up. Bree and Maggie, never morning people, looked like groggy, beautiful cats, stretching and yawning. After their showers, they were like new, full of energy. Bree whisked us away to get our marriage license, file for adoption, and start temporary custody. Later, we had seafood for dinner, and the girls couldn't stop raving about the food and prices. Wow, Mac, you must make a lot of money, Maggie said. I chuckled. I make about $90,000 a year, which is more than enough to support us. But Bree? She makes 10 times more. They stared at her in shock. Bree laughed. It's just money. The point is, we can treat you girls whenever you want. And honestly, Mac cooks better than most restaurants. You cook? Maggie asked. Bree nodded. Yes, but simple things. Anyone can follow a recipe, but this guy, he's a genius in the kitchen. She's pretty good too, I added, if only she could stay focused. Bree playfully hit me. Make one mistake and he'll never let it go, she joked. I grinned. In our first year, she burnt food so badly, not even the dog would eat it. She'd take it outside and leave it under a tree, like some kind of burnt offering. Everyone laughed. Bree, in a great mood, snuggled up to me and the girls giggled. We've never eaten anywhere this nice, Maggie said. Bree gave her a serious look. Maggie, say it again with confidence. Maggie smiled, straightened up, and repeated herself with pride. Bree grinned. See, we may be from Detroit, but we've got class. The girls beamed, clearly proud. Over time, Bree taught them everything. from how to dress to how to walk, talk, and carry themselves. In just 6 months, they went from street smart to sophisticated, excelling in everything they did. That night, Bree was excited. Back home, she told the girls, "Turn on the TV and leave it on all night." They laughed, knowing what was coming next. She grabbed my hand and led me to the bedroom. "We're celebrating tonight," she said with a mischievous smile. "What are we celebrating?" I asked. "The start of something incredible," she whispered. "I love you, Mac. I'll remind you of that every night and show you just how special we are. Tonight, we take it to a new level. Ready?" "Show me," I said, feeling the heat between us. With a smile, she let her fiery red hair down. A rare sight. Her hair fell in waves down her back, making her even more irresistible. She turned, her eyes gleaming. "Unzip me," she murmured. I slowly unzipped her dress, feeling the tension build as the fabric slid off her shoulders. She stood before me in high heels and a lacy white bra, arching her back slightly, more stunning than ever. Bree always exuded confidence, but tonight was different. She radiated sensuality as she dropped her bra and teased, "Looks like you're overdressed." "And what are we going to do about that?" I asked, my voice full of anticipation. She moved closer, her body flowing smoothly, and gently pushed me onto the bed. Kneeling beside my hips, she unbuttoned my shirt, slipping it off and briefly trapping my arms before tossing it aside. With skilled hands, she undid my belt and pants, pulling them down along with my socks and shoes. I lay there, fully exposed, overwhelmed by her intensity. This wasn't just physical. It was Bree at her most vulnerable. We made love, and afterward, I felt a new depth in our connection. She looked at me, her eyes soft but full of emotion. "Mac, I love you," she said, her voice trembling. "I've been selfish, never really giving myself to anyone until now. Do you want me? I'm ready to be your friend, lover, wife, and a mother to the girls. Will you help me? Be patient with me. You'll never regret it." I kissed her deeply. "I love you more than anything. You'll need to be patient with me too. We're a team, and we can do this together." "I'll do anything for you and the girls," she whispered. "I'm scared I'll be a bad mom. I've always feared it. That's why I never wanted kids." "I don't know how to be a father either," I laughed. "But I think we'll figure it out." "I don't know how to be a good wife," she admitted. "We messed up before." "I know," I agreed. "But it wasn't all you." "It was," she said. "I was immature, but I'll try to grow up." "Me too," I said, holding her close. Eventually, we drifted off to sleep. The next morning, we showered together, laughing and teasing. Afterward, Bree put on her pajamas, glowing with happiness. "What's going on?" I asked. "We'll have guests soon," she said with a sly smile. I shrugged, put on some clothes, and sure enough, there was a knock at the door. Stokely burst in, followed by the family dog, and soon Maggie joined too. We had a playful wrestling match, with the dog winning, of course. After a while, we all headed out for breakfast. Later, Bree announced we had an appointment. "Where?" I asked, suspicious. "You'll see," she said with a grin. We drove to the courthouse, and as we entered, I started to understand. "Do you have business here?" I asked. "Yes, a very important case," she laughed. Inside, Bree knelt down and pulled a small box from her purse. "Mac, will you marry me again?" she asked, her voice confident. "This time, it's forever. I never stopped loving you, and I want to be your wife again." She held our old wedding rings along with her engagement ring. "Brianna, are you sure?" I asked, my heart racing. "I've never been more sure," she replied. "Girls, help me out. He's so stubborn." "Yes, please, Mac," they begged. "We want to be a family. We love you and Bree." How could I resist? In about 10 minutes, we were married again. To celebrate, Bree took us to a new Greek restaurant. As I sat there, looking at Bree, the girls, and our future, I felt my life unfolding. The most beautiful woman was my wife, and I had 2 amazing daughters who were growing up fast. Their happiness filled me with joy. Could we make this work? Only time would tell. It took a month to get custody of the girls. Bree worked tirelessly, and when it finally happened, they were the happiest I'd ever seen them. And so were we. Bree sold her apartment and moved in with me. I worried about us getting on each other's nerves, but it went better than I expected. A few weeks after the wedding, Bree forgot to call us after a dinner with a client. When she came home, we were all waiting. Stokely held up the phone, and Bree immediately realized her mistake. Without saying a word, she burst into tears, dropping to her knees in front of us. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I forgot to call. I'll do my best not to let it happen again." Her apology was a turning point. Bree rarely apologized, so this showed real growth. Stokely hugged her first, then Maggie, and finally, I joined them. "It's okay, we understand," I said. From that moment, Bree and I made more effort to make each other happy, and the girls were great at helping us. We had small disagreements, but I'd never felt more content. Bree enrolled the girls in the private school where I taught, and we grew closer during our daily rides together. They shared their thoughts, dreams, and worries, filling my life with energy. After school, they'd do their homework, and then we'd walk the dog before dinner. Dinner was usually at 5, and Bree would join us around 6:30. If she was running late, she'd call, and we'd go out for dinner instead. When Maggie turned 16, she only wanted one thing: her driver's license. She studied hard and passed on her first try. The night before her birthday, Bree casually brought up a new idea in bed. "I want to buy Maggie a car," she said. "Okay, what kind?" I asked. "A new Camaro convertible," she said with a gleam in her eye. "How much will that cost?" I asked. "Mac, does it really matter?" she replied, rolling her eyes. "Do you think we're going broke?" "No, I'd just like to know," I chuckled. "Sorry," she smiled, kissing me. "I think it'll be about $60,000. I whistled. "That's a lot for a car." "She deserves it," Bree said softly. "Yes, she does," I agreed. We ordered the car, a bright yellow Camaro with black stripes and a sleek black interior. Bree insisted on getting the big V8 engine, thinking it would hold its value better. And although I had some reservations, she was probably right. When the car arrived, we parked it in the garage and waited until Maggie's birthday morning. The next day, as usual, the girls grabbed their bags and followed me to the car for school. Bree was already in the garage, but I hadn't unlocked the doors. "Dad, let us in," Stokely said, sounding confused. "You're not riding with me today," I said teasingly. Maggie looked puzzled. "You're driving, Maggie," I said, holding out the keys. "Mom's not going to work?" Maggie asked, still not catching on. "No," I said, motioning toward the garage. "She's leaving. But what are you going to drive?" Maggie looked confused, and then I pressed the garage door opener. As the door lifted, her new Camaro came into view. Her big green eyes widened in shock. They both stood still, speechless. Suddenly, Maggie started crying, tears streaming down her face as she trembled, unable to speak. I jumped out of the car, and Bree rushed over, wrapping her arms around Maggie. "What's wrong, honey?" I asked, worried. "We thought you'd be happy. This is your car. It's for your birthday." Maggie buried her face in Bree's chest, crying too hard to answer. Stokely hugged her too, and we stood there holding Maggie until she could calm down enough to talk. Finally, Maggie whispered, "I don't need a car. I love you both so much, and this is too much. Stokely and I already talked about it. We don't need anything. We just need you to love us." I kissed her cheek. "We love you so much, Maggie," Bree said, her voice shaking. "We love you both more than anything in the world. Having you in our lives is a dream come true. We love giving you things because it makes us happy to see you happy. It's one of the ways we show our love." Now Stokely was crying too. I hugged them both. "Let's go check out the car," I said gently. "At least take a look." They wiped their tears and let us lead them to the garage. I opened the driver's door for Maggie, and Bree opened the passenger side for Stokely. Maggie put her hands on the steering wheel, smiling through her tears. "It suits you," I told her softly. "Go ahead, start it up." Maggie turned the key, and the V8 engine roared to life. Both girls giggled through their tears, excitement starting to take over. I knocked on the window, and Maggie rolled it down. I leaned in and kissed her forehead. "See you at school," I said with a grin. She drove out of the garage and stopped just outside the driveway. Then she suddenly ran back, throwing herself into our arms, kissing us over and over. "I love you so much," she cried. "Thank you. You're the best mom and dad ever." She ran back to the car, and they drove off, the engine rumbling. I turned to Bree, and she was crying too. Somehow, I realized I had tears running down my face as well. "Look at us," I said, laughing through my tears. "You'd think we were the ones turning 16. "It was a great idea, Bree. You're incredible," I said, hugging her tightly. For Stokely's 16th birthday, we did the same thing. It wasn't quite as emotional as Maggie's, but it was still a special moment. The girls were growing up fast, and our family was stronger than ever. We took them on trips to Hawaii and Belize, celebrated their achievements, and watched them grow into amazing young women. When Maggie graduated from high school, she was already well into her college studies. The day Stokely started college, I came home to find Bree sitting on the couch, crying. I sat down beside her and wrapped my arms around her. We sat in silence for a while. just holding each other. Eventually, Bree looked up at me, her blue eyes full of tears. "Our kids are grown up, Mac," she whispered. "I know," I replied, kissing her gently. "That's what kids do." She cupped my face in her hands, looking deeply into my eyes. "Let's have another one, Mac," she said, her voice trembling. "This time, just you and me. I want a baby, Mac." She broke down, crying harder. "I never thought I'd want this. I love you so much, and I miss them so much already. I want to do it again. It was so amazing. I know they're only 60 miles away, but I miss them." "I miss them too, kitten," I whispered, holding her close. "Maybe we should start practicing if we're serious about this baby." Bree gasped, looking up at me with wide eyes. "Really? You mean it? You want a baby?" "Of course," I said, smiling. "I hope it's a red-haired girl just like you. I love you with all my heart, Bree." I picked her up and carried her through the empty house to our bedroom, ready to start the next chapter of our lives. We had to kick Granville out of the room, but that didn't matter. We were building something new, something beautiful. As I drifted off to sleep, my eyes landed on the picture of Maggie and Stokely on the nightstand. They didn't look like strangers anymore. They looked like family.
Welcome to another story on Cheating Tales Lab. We're so happy to have you here, and today's story is one we think you'll really enjoy. So without further ado, let's begin. I stared at the laptop screen, my jaw clenched. The GPS tracker blinked, showing Lydia's location at some trendy cafe downtown. It was 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. She was supposed to be at yoga. Damn it, Lydia, I muttered, rubbing my temples. I'd suspected something was off for weeks. Late-night classes, constant texting, and a growing emotional distance. But seeing concrete proof made my stomach churn. My phone buzzed. A text from Lydia. "Class running late. Don't wait up." I almost laughed at the blatant lie. Instead, I grabbed my keys and headed out. Time to see what my darling wife was really up to. The cafe was dimly lit, trying too hard to be hip. I parked across the street, watching. There she was, sitting at an outdoor table, laughing, touching the arm of some guy I'd never seen before. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I wanted to storm over there, to confront them both. But no, I needed more information before making my move. I snapped a few photos with my phone, then drove home, my mind racing. Who was he? How long had this been going on? And more importantly, what was I going to do about it? Back at our house, our obscenely large house that I'd worked my ass off to afford, I poured myself a scotch and settled into my home office. Time to do some digging. It didn't take long to find him online. Ethan Blackwood, 32, local celebrity yoga instructor, with a carefully curated Instagram full of shirtless photos and inspirational quotes. What a joke. I was still scrolling through his social media when I heard Lydia's key in the door. "Showtime. Adrian," she called out. "You still up?" I stepped out of the office, scotch in hand. "Hey, hon, how was yoga?" She faltered for just a second before regaining her composure. "Oh, great. Really challenging class tonight." "I bet," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "You must be exhausted after all that exertion." Lydia's eyes narrowed slightly. "What's that supposed to mean?" I shrugged, taking a sip of scotch. "Nothing. Just making conversation." She stared at me for a long moment, then seemed to relax. "Well, I am beat. I'm going to grab a shower and head to bed." "Sweet dreams," I said, watching her go. Once I heard the shower start, I went back to my research. I needed proof. Real, solid proof that would hold up in court. Because make no mistake, there was no way in hell I was letting Lydia walk away with half of everything I'd built. The next morning, I made some calls and arranged a meeting with Frank Sutherland, a private investigator who came highly recommended. We met at a nondescript diner, away from prying eyes. Frank was a grizzled man in his 50s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "So, Mr. Hawthorne, he said after I'd laid out the situation. You want proof of your wife's infidelity. That's right, I replied. Concrete evidence. Photos, video, whatever it takes. He nodded slowly. And what do you plan to do with this evidence once you have it? I met his gaze steadily. Whatever I have to do to protect myself and my assets. A ghost of a smile crossed Frank's face. Understood. I'll get started right away. But I should warn you, Mr. Hawthorne. Sometimes these investigations turn up unexpected results. I hope you're prepared for whatever I might find. I'm prepared for anything, I said firmly. Just get me what I need. As I left the diner, my phone buzzed. A text from my best friend and business partner, Victor. Drinks tonight? I hesitated and replied, Sure, the usual spot at 8. I needed to talk to someone about all this, and if there was anyone I could trust, it was Victor. We'd been through too much together for me to doubt him now. The bar was crowded when I arrived, but I spotted Victor at our regular table in the back. He waved me over. 2 whiskeys already waiting. You look like hell, he said as I sat down. I chuckled humorlessly. Feel like it too. I took a long sip of whiskey, savoring the burn. It's Lydia. Victor's expression turned serious. What's going on? I told him everything my suspicions, following Lydia to the cafe, hiring the PI. He listened intently, his brow furrowed with concern. Jesus, Adrian, he said when I finished. I'm so sorry. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, I admitted, but I'm not letting her get away with this. I've worked too damn hard to let her and her boy toy take me for everything I'm worth. Victor nodded slowly. Just be careful, okay? Don't do anything rash. Maybe there's an explanation. An explanation? I cut him off, anger flaring. For what? Her lying to my face? Sneaking around behind my back. He held up his hands placatingly. I'm just saying, wait until you have all the facts before you make any big moves. You've got a lot to lose here, Adrian. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. You're right. I know. I can't believe she'd do this to me. After everything we've been through together. Victor reached across the table, clasping my shoulder. Whatever happens, I've got your back. You know that, right? I managed a small smile. Yeah, I know. Thanks, man. As I drove home that night, Victor's words echoed in my head. Be careful. Don't do anything rash. But with every passing day, every lie Lydia told, I could feel my control slipping. Something had to give, and soon. The next week passed in a blur of suspicion and barely contained rage. I went through the motions at work, but my mind was constantly on Lydia and her betrayal. Frank sent regular updates, more yoga classes that were anything but clandestine meetings at out-of-the-way cafes and parks. Finally, he sent the message I'd been waiting for. Got what you need. Meet me at the diner. I made an excuse to leave work early and raced to meet Frank. He was waiting in a corner booth, a thick manila envelope on the table in front of him. It's all here, he said without preamble as I sat down. Photos, video, phone records. Your wife's been having an affair with this Ethan guy for at least 3 months. I reached for the envelope with shaking hands, but Frank held it back. You sure you want to see this? He asked, his expression grave. Once you do, there's no going back. I met his gaze steadily. I'm sure. He nodded and handed over the envelope. I opened it, steeling myself for what I was about to see. The first photo hit me like a punch to the gut. Lydia and Ethan, locked in a passionate embrace outside some seedy motel. I flipped through the rest quickly, each image searing itself into my brain. Them laughing over dinner, walking hand in hand through the park, kissing in his car. There's video too, Frank said quietly. But I'll leave it up to you if you want to watch that. I shook my head, shoving everything back into the envelope. This is enough. I pulled out my checkbook. Thank you for your work, Mr. Sutherland. I assume this covers everything. He glanced at the amount and nodded. More than. You sure you don't need anything else? No, I said, standing up. I've got what I need. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing. Now that I had proof, what was I going to do with it? Confront Lydia? Go straight to a divorce lawyer? I needed time to think, to plan my next move carefully. But as I pulled into our driveway and saw Lydia's car already there, something in me snapped. All the hurt, the betrayal, the anger I'd been holding back came rushing to the surface. To hell with careful planning. It was time for a reckoning. I stormed into the house, finding Lydia in the kitchen chopping vegetables for dinner. She looked up with a smile that quickly faded when she saw my expression. Adrian, what's wrong? I laughed bitterly. What's wrong? Why don't you tell me, Lydia? How was yoga tonight? She paled slightly but kept her composure. It was fine. Why are you? Cut the bullshit. I snarled, slamming the envelope down on the counter. I know everything. About Ethan. About all of it. Lydia's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed. You've been spying on me? Damn right I have. I shot back. And it's a good thing I did, or I'd still be in the dark about my wife screwing her yoga instructor behind my back. It's not like that, Lydia protested, her voice rising. You don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. I cut her off. I understand that while I've been working my ass off to give us this life, you've been throwing it all away for some narcissistic pretty boy. Lydia's expression hardened. Maybe if you paid half as much attention to me as you do to your precious company, I wouldn't have had to look elsewhere. I reeled back as if she'd slapped me. So this is my fault? You're blaming me for your decision to cheat. I'm not blaming you, she said, her tone softening. I'm just saying, we've been drifting apart for a long time, Adrian. Ethan, he makes me feel alive again. I shook my head in disgust. Spare me the justifications. I don't want to hear it. I want you out of this house. Tonight. Lydia's eyes widened in panic. What? Adrian, no. We can work this out. We can go to counseling, There's nothing to work out, I said coldly. We're done. I'll have divorce papers drawn up in the morning. You can't just throw me out, she protested. This is my home, too. I have rights. I laughed humorlessly. Rights? You lost any rights you had the moment you decided to cheat. You want rights? Talk to my lawyer. I turned to walk away, but Lydia grabbed my arm. Adrian, please. I'm sorry. It was a mistake. I love you. I jerked away from her touch. Don't you dare say you love me. If you loved me, you never would have done this. Tears welled up in Lydia's eyes. What about everything we've built together? Are you really willing to throw it all away? I stared at her for a long moment, seeing not the woman I'd loved for years, but a stranger, a liar, a cheat. You threw it away? I said quietly. Not me. Now get out. I walked away, ignoring her pleas and protests. I locked myself in my office, listening as she moved around the house, gathering some belongings. Finally, I heard the front door open and close. Only then did I allow myself to break down, pouring another scotch with shaking hands. It was over. My marriage, the life I thought I had, all of it built on lies. But as the initial shock wore off, another emotion began to take hold. Determination. Lydia might have betrayed me, but I'd be damned if I let her destroy everything I'd worked for. I pulled out my phone and dialed Victor's number. Hey, I said when he answered, I need your help. It's time to go to war. The next morning, I woke early and headed straight to the office of Evelyn Green, one of the top divorce attorneys in the city. I'd called in every favor I had to get an emergency appointment. Evelyn was a sharp-featured woman in her 50s, with a reputation for being utterly ruthless in court. Perfect. Mr. Hawthorne, she said as I entered her office. I understand you're in need of my services. I nodded, taking a seat across from her desk. My wife's been cheating on me. I want a divorce, and I want to make damn sure she doesn't take me for everything I'm worth in the process. Evelyn's eyebrows raised slightly. I see. And do you have proof of this infidelity? I placed Frank's envelope on her desk. Everything's in there. Photos, videos, phone records, you name it. She opened the envelope, scanning its contents with a practiced eye. "This is good," she murmured. "Very good. It certainly strengthens our position. So what do we do now?" I asked. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, fixing me with a steely gaze. "Now, Mr. Hawthorne, we prepare for war. Your wife is going to fight this. Make no mistake. She'll try to paint herself as a victim, claim emotional neglect, possibly even abuse." I started to protest, but she held up a hand. "I'm not saying it's true. I'm saying it's what she'll likely try. We need to be ready for anything." I nodded slowly. "Whatever it takes." I'm not letting her walk away with a dime more than she deserves. A small, predatory smile crossed Evelyn's face. "I was hoping you'd say that. Now, let's talk strategy." For the next 2 hours, we went over every detail of my marriage, my finances, the evidence against Lydia. Evelyn was thorough, leaving no stone unturned. "One last thing," she said as our meeting wrapped up. "I need you to start documenting everything. Every interaction with your wife, every expense, every phone call, anything that could be relevant to the case." "Got it," I replied, standing up. "Thanks for your help, Ms. Green." She nodded. "We'll be in touch soon. And Mr. Hawthorne, try to keep your cool. I know it's difficult, but anything you do now could come back to haunt us in court." I left Evelyn's office feeling both drained and energized. The reality of what I was about to go through was daunting, but I was ready for the fight. As I drove back to the office, my phone rang. "Victor." "Hey," I answered. "What's up?" "Just checking in," he said. "How'd it go with the lawyer?" I filled him in on the meeting, on Evelyn's warnings about what to expect. Victor let out a low whistle. "Sounds like it's going to get ugly. You sure you're ready for this?" "I don't have a choice," I replied. "Lydia made her bed. Now she can lie in it." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Listen, Adrian, I know you're hurting, but is this the way to go? Maybe if you both cooled off, talk things out." "There's nothing to talk about." I cut him off. "She cheated, Victor. She lied to my face for months. I'm done." He sighed. "All right, man. I just hate to see it end like this. But I've got your back, no matter what." "I know," I said, my tone softening slightly. "Thanks. I'm going to need all the support I can get." As I hung up, a flicker of doubt crossed my mind. Was I being too hasty, too harsh? But then I remembered the photos, Lydia's lies, the look on her face when I confronted her. No, this was the only way forward. I arrived at the office, trying to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting. I'd built this company from the ground up, poured everything I had into it. The thought of Lydia trying to take even a piece of it made my blood boil. My assistant poked her head in around lunchtime. "Mr. Hawthorne, your wife is here to see you." I tensed, then forced myself to relax. "Send her in." Lydia entered, looking pale and drawn. Gone was her usual perfectly put-together appearance. "Good. Adrian," she said softly, "we need to talk." I leaned back in my chair, keeping my expression neutral. "I think we said everything we needed to say last night." She shook her head, taking a step closer. "No, please. Just hear me out. What I did, it was a terrible mistake. I know that. But our marriage doesn't have to end because of one stupid decision." I laughed bitterly. "One stupid decision? Lydia, you've been lying to me for months, sneaking around, making a fool of me. That's not one decision. That's a calculated betrayal." "I know," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "And I'm so sorry, Adrian. Please, can we just talk about this? I made a terrible mistake, but I still love you." I stared at her, feeling nothing but cold contempt. "Love? You don't know the meaning of the word. Get out of my office, Lydia. We'll communicate through our lawyers from now on." Adrian, please. Now, I said, my voice low. Lydia flinched, then turned and fled the office. I sat back in my chair, taking deep breaths to calm myself. I couldn't let her get to me. I had to stay focused, stay strong. My phone buzzed. A text from Frank. Got more info. Meet tonight? I replied quickly. 8 p.m., the usual place. The rest of the day crawled by. I buried myself in work, trying to ignore the constant ache in my chest. By the time I left the office, I was exhausted but determined. Frank was waiting at our usual booth in the back of the dimly lit bar. He nodded as I slid in across from him. What have you got? I asked without preamble. Frank leaned forward, his voice low. It's worse than we thought, Adrian. Your wife and this Ethan guy, they're planning something big. I felt my stomach drop. What do you mean? I've been monitoring their communications, Frank said. They're talking about framing you for something. Domestic abuse, maybe. Something that would ruin you socially and financially. I clenched my fists under the table. Those bastards. Do you approve? Frank nodded, sliding a USB drive across the table. It's all there. Texts, emails, recorded conversations. They're getting reckless, confident. They don't think you suspect a thing. I pocketed the drive, my mind racing. Thanks, Frank. Keep digging. I want to know every move they make. As I left the bar, I made a decision. It was time to go on the offensive. Lydia and her boy toy thought they could destroy me. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The next morning, I called Evelyn. I need to move faster, I told her. They're planning something big. Understood, she replied crisply. I'll have the divorce papers drawn up today. In the meantime, start documenting everything. And Adrian, be careful. Don't give them any ammunition to use against you. I spent the next few days in a state of hypervigilance. Every interaction with Lydia was carefully managed, recorded. I watched her try to provoke me, to push me into saying or doing something she could use against me. But I remained calm, detached. It all came to a head on a Friday night. I came home late from work to find Lydia and Ethan in our living room. The sight of them together in my home made my blood boil. What the hell is this? I growled. Lydia stood up, her eyes wide with fake innocence. Adrian, I didn't expect you home so early. Ethan just stopped by to save it. I cut her off. I know exactly what's going on here. Ethan stood up, moving slightly in front of Lydia. Look, man, there's no need for things to get ugly. We're all adults here. I laughed bitterly. Adults? Is that what you call sneaking around behind my back? Planning to frame me? Lydia gasped. Frame you? Adrian, what are you talking about? Don't play dumb, I spat. I know everything. The affair, your little scheme to accuse me of abuse. Did you really think I was that stupid? Ethan's face hardened. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I think I do, I said, pulling out my phone. In fact, I've got proof. Want to hear it? I played a recording of Lydia and Ethan discussing their plan. Lydia's face went pale, while Ethan's flushed with anger. You've been spying on us? Lydia screeched. Damn right I have. I replied coldly, and it's a good thing I did. Now, get out of my house, both of you, before I call the police. Ethan grabbed Lydia's arm. Come on, let's go. This isn't over, Hawthorne. I watched them leave, feeling a mixture of rage and vindication. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but I'd won this round. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings and strategic moves. Evelyn was worth every penny, ruthlessly dismantling every attempt Lydia and Ethan made to discredit me or gain leverage. I threw myself into work, determined not to let this mess affect my company. But it was hard, especially with Victor constantly trying to get me to talk things out with Lydia. I'm telling you, Adrian, he said one night over drinks. Maybe if you just sat down with her, worked things out. I cut him off. There's nothing to work out, Victor. She made her choice. Now she has to live with the consequences. Victor sighed, shaking his head. I just hate to see you like this, man. You're not sleeping, you're barely eating. Is it really worth it? I stared at him, feeling a flicker of suspicion. Why was he so invested in me reconciling with Lydia? It's worth everything, I said firmly. I won't let them win. I won't let them take what I built. As I left the bar that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more going on than I realized. I needed to be careful. I couldn't trust anyone, not even my oldest friend. The final blow came a week later. Lydia, desperate and cornered, filed a police report accusing me of domestic abuse. She showed up at the station with bruises, spinning a tale of years of control and violence. But I was ready. I had recordings of every interaction we'd had since I discovered the affair, footage from hidden cameras in our home, showing Lydia's attempts to provoke me and my calm responses. The police, presented with overwhelming evidence of Lydia's deception, had no choice but to drop the investigation. Lydia was charged with filing a false report. As I left the police station, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was over. I'd won. But as I drove home, a new determination settled over me. Winning wasn't enough. Lydia, Ethan, and anyone else involved in their scheme needed to pay. And I was going to make sure they did, no matter what it took. The morning after Lydia's failed attempt to frame me, I strode into my office with renewed purpose. My assistant, Sarah, hurried after me, a stack of papers in her arms. "Mr. Hawthorne, the divorce papers are ready for your signature," she said, placing them on my desk. I picked up a pen, a smile on my face. "Perfect timing, Sarah. Let's get this over with." As I signed my name, I felt a sense of finality. This was it, the end of my marriage, the beginning of my revenge. "Have these delivered to Lydia immediately," I instructed Sarah. "And get Evelyn on the phone. We need to move fast." Within an hour, Evelyn was seated across from me, her expression as fierce as mine. "We've got them on the ropes, Adrian," she said. "Now it's time to deliver the knockout punch. What's our next move?" I leaned forward, my voice cold. "I want to hit them where it hurts most. Their money, their reputation, everything." Evelyn nodded, a predatory glint in her eye. "Leave it to me. By the time we're done, they won't know what hit them." As Evelyn left, my phone rang. It was Frank. "Adrian, we've got a problem," he said without preamble. "Your wife and that yoga instructor? They're trying to access your business accounts." I felt a surge of anger, quickly replaced by a calm determination. "Let them try, Frank. In fact, make it easier for them. I got an idea." Over the next few days, I set my plan in motion. With the help of my IT team, we created a series of fake accounts, making them look like they held substantial funds. Then we waited. It didn't take long. Late one night, I received an alert on my phone. Someone was attempting to transfer a large sum from one of the fake accounts. I smiled, picking up the phone to call Evelyn. "We've got them," I said. "Time to spring the trap." The next morning, I walked into a conference room where Lydia and Ethan were waiting, flanked by their lawyers. Evelyn stood by my side, a stack of documents in her hands. "What's this about, Adrian?" Lydia demanded. "We're in the middle of divorce proceedings. You can't just summon us here like." "Oh, I think you know exactly what this is about." I cut her off coldly. "Your little attempt to embezzle from my company last night." Ethan paled, while Lydia's eyes widened in panic. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. I nodded to Evelyn, who began distributing documents. "These are records of your attempted transfer," I explained, "along with a history of your access to company accounts you shouldn't have had access to." Care to explain? Their lawyers looked stricken, quickly scanning the documents. Lydia and Ethan exchanged panicked glances. "This is all a misunderstanding," Ethan began, but I held up a hand to silence him. "Save it," I snapped. "Here's what's going to happen. Lydia, you're going to sign these papers, agreeing to a divorce settlement that leaves you with nothing. Ethan, you're going to disappear. If either of you tries to fight this, I'll press charges for attempted embezzlement. Are we clear?" Lydia burst into tears, while Ethan looked like he might be sick. Their lawyers huddled together, whispering furiously. Finally, Lydia's lawyer spoke up. "We'll need time to review these documents." "You have an hour," I said firmly. "I suggest you use it wisely." As they filed out of the room, I turned to Evelyn. "Make sure everything's airtight. I want this wrapped up by the end of the day." Evelyn nodded, a satisfied smile on her face. "Don't worry, Adrian. They don't stand a chance." True to my word, by that evening, the divorce was finalized. Lydia left with nothing but the clothes on her back, while Ethan slunk away, his reputation in tatters. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt hollow, empty. Something still wasn't right. That feeling was confirmed the next day when I received a call from Frank. "Adrian, you're not going to believe this," he said, his voice tense. "I've uncovered something big. It's about Victor." I felt my stomach drop. "What about him?" "He's been in on it from the beginning," Frank said. "He's been helping Lydia and Ethan. And there's more. He's been embezzling from your company for years." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Victor, my oldest friend, my business partner, I couldn't believe it, didn't want to believe it. But as Frank laid out the evidence, I felt a cold rage building inside me. The betrayal cut deep, deeper than anything Lydia had done. "What do you want to do?" Frank asked. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Set up a meeting. Me, Victor, and the board. Don't tell him why. I want to see his face when I confront him." The next day, I sat at the head of the conference table, watching as the board members filed in. Victor was the last to arrive, a confused expression on his face. "Adrian, what's this about?" he asked as he took his seat. I stood up slowly, my gaze locked on Victor. "It's about trust, Victor. Loyalty. Things I thought you understood." Victor's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" I nodded to my assistant, who began distributing folders to each board member. "These documents outline years of embezzlement from our company. Funds siphoned off to offshore accounts. Care to guess whose name is on those accounts, Victor?" The color drained from Victor's face as he flipped through the folder. "Adrian, I can explain. Save it." I cut him off coldly. "I trusted you, Victor. You were like a brother to me. And all this time, you've been stealing from me, conspiring with my wife to destroy me." The board members murmured in shock, glaring at Victor with a mixture of anger and disgust. Victor stood up, his eyes wild. "You don't understand, Adrian. I had no choice. Lydia, I said save it." I repeated, my voice like ice. "You're done here, Victor. The board will vote to remove you immediately, and then you'll be hearing from my lawyers." As security escorted a protesting Victor from the room, I turned to address the board. "I apologize for this unpleasantness. Rest assured, steps are being taken to recover the stolen funds and prevent anything like this from happening again." The meeting adjourned, and I retreated to my office, feeling drained. The betrayal seemed endless. Was there anyone I could trust? My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. About Lydia, Victor, and the truth you don't know yet." I stared at the message, a mixture of curiosity and wariness washing over me. Who could this be? And what truth were they talking about? As I contemplated my next move, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. The game had changed, the stakes raised. But I was ready. Whatever came next, I would face it head on, because one thing was clear. In this world of lies and betrayal, the only person I could truly rely on was myself. I sat in my office, staring at the message on my phone. A meeting with Noah Winter, the journalist who'd been masquerading as Ethan, was set for noon. My mind raced with possibilities. What new revelations awaited me? At precisely 12 o'clock, my assistant ushered in a man I barely recognized. Gone was the carefully cultivated yoga instructor look. In its place stood a sharp-eyed professional in a crisp suit. "Mr. Hawthorne," Noah said, extending his hand. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." I shook his hand firmly. "Let's skip the pleasantries, Mr. Winter. You said you had information for me." Noah nodded, taking a seat across from me. "I've been investigating corruption and infidelity among the city's elite for months. Your wife and Victor were just the tip of the iceberg. And you thought pretending to be her lover was the best way to get information?" I asked, my tone icy. "It wasn't my first choice," Noah admitted, "but it proved effective. I've uncovered a web of deceit that goes far beyond your personal situation." I leaned back in my chair. "I'm listening." Noah pulled out a thick file. "I'm prepared to give you exclusive rights to my story. In exchange, I want your protection from any potential fallout." "Why me?" I asked, suspicion creeping into my voice. "Because you're the wrong party here, Mr. Hawthorne, and because you have the resources and influence to make sure the story sees the light of day." I considered his offer for a long moment. On one condition: the article focuses primarily on Lydia and Victor's betrayal. The rest can be background. Noah hesitated, then nodded. "Agreed." We spent the next few hours going over the details. By the time Noah left, I had a clear picture of just how deep the corruption in our social circle ran, and I knew exactly how I was going to use this information. The next morning, I called an emergency board meeting. As the members filed in, I could see the confusion on their faces. "Gentlemen," I began once everyone was seated, "I've called you here because we have a situation that requires immediate action." I laid out the basics of Noah's investigation, watching as shock and disbelief spread across the room. "Mr. Hawthorne," one of the board members sputtered, "are you saying that our company has been unknowingly involved in these activities?" I nodded. "Through Victor's actions, yes. But we have an opportunity here, a chance to get ahead of the story and position ourselves as the victims rather than the perpetrators." Another board member leaned forward. "What do you propose?" "Full transparency," I said. "We cooperate fully with the investigation. We open our books. We clean house. And we use this as a chance to rebrand ourselves as a beacon of corporate integrity." The room erupted in discussion. I let them argue for a few minutes before holding up my hand for silence. "I understand your concerns," I said, "but trust me, this is our best move. The story is going to break with or without our cooperation. This way, we control the narrative." Slowly, one by one, the board members nodded their agreement. By the end of the meeting, we had a plan in place. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. We hired an independent auditing firm to go through our books with a fine-tooth comb. Any employee even remotely connected to Victor's schemes was let go. We instituted new transparency policies and ethical guidelines. And through it all, I worked closely with Noah, shaping the story that would soon rock the city to its core. The day the article was published, I braced myself for the fallout, but I needn't have worried. The public reaction was overwhelmingly in our favor. My phone rang nonstop with calls from clients and business partners, all expressing their support and admiration for our handling of the situation. Our stock price, which had taken an initial hit, rebounded stronger than ever. As for Lydia and Victor, the reaction was swift and merciless. They became pariahs overnight, shunned by the very social circles they'd once dominated. I was in my office, reviewing the latest round of positive press coverage, when my assistant buzzed me. "Mr. Hawthorne, there's a woman here to see you. She says she's your sister." I froze. "Isabella?" I hadn't seen or spoken to her in years. "Send her in," I said after a moment's hesitation. The door opened, and there she was, Isabella, looking older and harder than I remembered, but unmistakably my little sister. "Hello, Adrian," she said, her voice cool. "It's been a while." I stood up slowly. "Isabella, what are you doing here?" She walked further into the office, her eyes taking in the trappings of my success. I saw the article. Quite a story. Is that why you're here? I asked. To gawk at the family scandal? Isabella's eyes flashed. I'm here because Lydia reached out to me. She's desperate, Adrian. She has nowhere else to turn. I laughed bitterly. And you thought I'd what? Welcome her back with open arms. Of course not, Isabella snapped. I came to warn you. She's not done, Adrian. She's planning something. I sat back down, suddenly tired. Let her try. I've beaten her at every turn so far. Isabella leaned forward, her voice urgent. You don't understand. I've known about her affair with Victor for months. I kept quiet, hoping. Hoping what? I demanded. Hoping it would lead to Victor's downfall, she admitted. I have my own score to settle with him. I stared at her, a new wave of betrayal washing over me. You knew? All this time, and you said nothing. Isabella had the grace to look ashamed. I was wrong. I see that now. But Adrian, there's more to this story than you know. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Meeting. Now. Your office. It's time for the truth. I showed the message to Isabella. Her face paled. It's Lydia. She's on her way here. Good, I said. It's time to end this once and for all. Within minutes, Lydia burst into my office, Victor trailing behind her. They both looked haggard, desperate. Adrian, Lydia began, but I cut her off. Save it, I snapped. I don't want to hear any more of your lies. It's not lies, Victor interjected. There's something you need to know. Isabella stepped forward. Let them speak, Adrian. I think we all need to hear this. I looked at the three of them, these people who had betrayed me so deeply. Part of me wanted to throw them out, to be done with all of this. But a larger part needed answers. Fine, I said coldly. Talk. What followed was a tangled web of revelations. Isabella admitted to her own affair with Victor years ago, which had led to our estrangement. Lydia confessed that her initial interest in me had been purely financial, but claimed she had grown to love me over time. Victor, looking more broken than I'd ever seen him, laid bare the full extent of his embezzlement and manipulation. As they talked, I felt a strange calm settle over me. These people, who I had once loved and trusted, had caused me so much pain. But sitting here, listening to their pathetic justifications, I realized something. I was free from Lydia's manipulation, from Victor's false friendship, from the weight of Isabella's unspoken resentment, free from the doubts and suspicions that had plagued me for so long. As they finished speaking, all three looked at me expectantly, waiting for my reaction, my forgiveness perhaps. I stood up slowly, my gaze moving from one to the other. Is that all? I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. Lydia stepped forward, tears in her eyes. Adrian, please. We can start over. I know I've hurt you, but no, I said firmly. We can't start over. There is no we anymore, Lydia. There hasn't been for a long time. I turned to Victor. You were my best friend. I trusted you with everything, and this is how you repay that trust. Victor opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. Don't. There's nothing you can say that will make this right. Finally, I looked at Isabella. You're my sister, and you kept this from me. All of it. I'm sorry, she whispered. I thought I was protecting you. I shook my head. You were protecting yourself, just like always. I walked to the door of my office and opened it. I want all of you out of my office, out of my company, out of my life. Adrian, Lydia pleaded, don't do this. I met her gaze steadily. It's already done. Goodbye, Lydia. One by one, they filed out. As Isabella passed me, she paused. What will you do now? She asked softly. I looked at her, feeling a mix of sadness and resolve. I'm going to live my life, on my terms, without any of you in it. The door closed behind them, and I was alone. But for the first time in months, I felt truly at peace. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into my work with renewed vigor. The company thrived under my leadership, our reputation for integrity drawing in new clients and partners. I also started a foundation, using my wealth and influence to help others who have been victims of betrayal and financial abuse. It felt good to give back, to turn my pain into something positive. One sunny afternoon, I found myself walking through the city park. As I strolled along the path, lost in thought, I quite literally bumped into someone. "Oh, I'm so sorry," a woman's voice said. I looked up to see a pair of kind eyes and a warm smile. "No, it was my fault," I replied, returning her smile. I wasn't watching where I was going. We got to talking, and before I knew it, an hour had passed. Her name was Sarah, and she was refreshingly honest and down to earth. As we parted ways, I felt a glimmer of something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in ages, I was looking forward to finding out. Standing in my office later that day, looking out over the city I had helped build, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I had lost a lot, it was true, but I had gained something far more valuable. I had gained myself. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.
I stayed up until 10 p.m., watching YouTube on my laptop with a queue of clips ready to play. One featured my favorite basketball player, Larry Big Al Johnson, making an impressive long-range shot. I've known Big Al since college, where he was a star player. After turning pro, he joined the Visors, my hometown team in Virginia. Now retired, he hosts shows on Wiz TV. I watched his videos for nostalgia. One unexpected clip showed him dancing carnally with a beautiful blonde at a Miami club, my wife. The clip, just published, showed them kissing passionately. When I called Lee, she didn't answer. She was supposed to be at a Miami business meeting with our friend Bart Kovach. I called Bart for information. He confirmed they spent 3 days together and suspected they were involved romantically. Apologies were exchanged, and plans were made to confront Lee. Bart suggested she might still be at the hotel, just in a different room. He also mentioned that Big Al lived nearby. I don't want to discuss this with her. If she asks, I'll explain. Fair enough. Talk to you later. Lee and I first met in college during our 20s. It was in our penultimate year, during math class. Walking in, I noticed her drawing in her notebook, surrounded by shy, nerdy guys. I decided to sit next to her. She joked about the lack of competition, and we hit it off. I'm not a typical nerd. 1.73 meters tall, 68 kilograms, with brown eyes and hair. She seemed intrigued by my confidence. I introduced myself as Lee Martin. She jokingly remarked we wouldn't need to change monograms if we married. We laughed as we headed to the student union. Lee was a stunning 6-foot-tall blonde with green eyes, an average figure, and a smile that captivated me. I said, "You must have been surprised when none of the guys in class sat next to you." "Thank you." I was surprised. Usually I have to fend off guys. You exploited my insecurities, and now I can't dissuade you. I have another lesson in 20 minutes, but I'd like to invite you to dinner. Maybe tonight. Since we're in the same class, we should get to know each other better. "No dinner. Sorry, I have a boyfriend and he won't like it." I had to try. "Well, I hope to see you again." "Me too." "I like you." "At least we'll see each other in class." We met in class twice a week, tackling the tough subject together. One day, I asked her about a problem, and she explained everything. After class, I asked about her experience with the course. "No, I'm good at math, and you? I need it for my chemistry major, but I struggle. Maybe you could give me some advice." "What is this, a joke? I have a boyfriend." "No, I respect that. I just need help. We can meet at a diner and go over subjects as if you were my tutor." "Fine. Diner at 4? "Agreed." During our diner meetings, I got to know Lee much better. We hit it off, discussing topics beyond mathematics. One day, a large guy approached our table where our books lay. Lee introduced him as Rashad, her boyfriend. We shook hands. Rashad was a medium-built black man, around 5'8" and 100 kilograms. We closed our math books, and Rashad asked why I was taking the class with Lee and the nerds. I explained I needed it for my chemistry major and programming. We then discussed why certain majors required unrelated courses. Rashad revealed his interest in physical training, aiming to become a high school teacher or pursue hockey professionally. Lee aimed for a business career, drawn to the idea of making money. As the semester progressed, I saw more of Lee. I invited her and Rashad to dinner at my off-campus apartment, along with Rashad's neighbor Stephanie. Dinner went well, with fish stew, spinach salad, and dessert. Lee and Rashad left after playing bridge, surprisingly enjoying the game. Lee and I won, bonding over her unique bidding system. Stephanie stayed the night, but we both understood our relationship was purely physical, as she had a boyfriend back home. That evening proved pivotal when Lee invited me to a backup bridge tournament at the Army baseball field. I agreed, unaware of the unfolding drama. 2 days after our dinner, I spotted Stephanie and Rashad entering our building together. Intrigued, I followed them to Stephanie's floor. Unsure what to do, I observed from my room. Hours later, Rashad emerged, prompting me to visit Stephanie. She seemed flustered, but confessed she felt no regret. We discussed the situation, agreeing to let things cool off for a while to assess our feelings. The bridge tournament was enjoyable, though the revelation about Rashad and Stephanie lingered. Lee asked why I hadn't informed her. I explained Rashad hadn't made a decision. She understood. Later, she expressed a desire to come to my place, which I eagerly accepted. In the heat of the moment, passion overtook us. Lee's arousal matched mine, resulting in intense satisfaction. Despite my initial doubts, the connection between us felt undeniable. We shared an carnal moment, reaffirming our compatibility. She followed me. "Shower?" she asked in a sultry voice. We shared an carnal shower against the smooth wall before washing up and returning to bed, drifting off to sleep. In the morning, I rose and brushed my teeth. Lee joined me, and I offered her a spare toothbrush. After freshening up, we tended to my morning arousal. During breakfast, Lee asked, "Am I as good as Stephanie? Am I as good as she was?" We locked eyes before she grinned. "He's bigger, but you're better. Steph is good, but you're fantastic." From then on, we were inseparable. Lee practically moved in with me, despite Rashad's objections. He eventually found another partner and frequently visited Stephanie. During his senior year, Big Al moved into our building on the 4th floor. Sometimes I saw him with Stephanie, though they never lived together. We exchanged pleasantries until Steph invited us over for dessert one day, where Big Al was also present. We had a pleasant evening, though afterward we were no longer invited. Lee and I tied the knot at 20, fresh out of college. I landed a job as a programmer at the Pentagon, while Lee worked in advertising, aiming to influence government decisions. I inherited a house near work from my grandfather, which we moved into after the lease expired. With 3 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen, a converted garage, and a finished basement, there was work to be done, which I tackled with the help of a friend from high school who ran a construction business. Lee became pregnant, and at 22, we welcomed twin daughters, Betsy and Linda. While they were not identical, they certainly kept us on our toes. Lee took a year off, and I scaled back my work to care for the twins. Eventually, I transitioned to contractor status, allowing me to work from home while Lee returned to part-time work. As the girls grew, Lee resumed full-time work, while I balanced my contracting gigs with developing 2 potentially profitable systems. Lee's career thrived, and by the time the girls entered primary school at 13, we were financially stable. At 35, I stayed active with running and table tennis, both of which kept me in good shape. Despite being together for 15 years, our bed life remained enjoyable, though Lee seemed to question its vitality before the revelation about Big Al. I searched up Big Al's address, finding it about 3 miles north of our place. I pondered whether what I witnessed in Miami was recent, or if it had been ongoing for some time. Other questions nagged at me as well. The day after I showed the girls the YouTube video, I requested DNA swabs from them and took one myself. It was Friday, and despite their need to attend school for tests and group sessions, I felt compelled to safeguard them from potential schoolyard confrontations. At 10, Lee rang. Seeing her name on the caller ID, I let it divert to voicemail. "Marty, please pick up," she pleaded. "Marty, I love you. I made a mistake. I'll be back this afternoon. Oh, damn." Her voice trailed off, punctuated by sobs. One of the upgrades I made to the house was installing an electronic entry system, and I changed the code. The converted garage sat unused but furnished, so I relocated Lee's belongings there, feeling it necessary. Both my mother and Lee's reached out, eager to know my plans. Uncertain myself, I could only convey as much. So I accessed Lee's Gmail account, scrolling through a month's worth of emails, both archived and current. Despite checking the trash folder, there was no correspondence with Big Al. A few messages pertained to work and the conference, with a couple offering some vague insights, but they were solely from a colleague attending the Miami event. Lee's flight was due to arrive at noon. Ignoring her calls, I enlisted a friend to monitor the airport, observing who disembarked from the plane and the ensuing dynamics. He spotted Lee exiting with her workmates, glancing around. He recorded a video on his phone, then proceeded to fetch her luggage, remaining at the exit. 5 minutes after others had deplaned, Big Al emerged. He too surveyed the area before heading to baggage claim. My friend trailed him while Lee waited for a taxi. Big Al approached her, speaking, but she shook her head, declining. A taxi pulled up, and the dispatcher ushered them both inside. My friend sent me a video. 20 minutes later, the taxi pulled up at the house, but only Lee emerged, visibly flustered. Discovering her access code didn't work, she knocked and rang the bell. I opened the door to find her in tears. "I'm so sorry, Marty. I never realized how much of a mess this would become," she sobbed. "You don't belong here, Lee. Your belongings are in the garage until you find somewhere else. Maybe Elle's house would suit you better." "Oh, Marty, there's nothing between us. I love you. You publicly humiliated me, made me a joke. Our daughter's at school. Who knows what they're dealing with? You're despicable. Get out of my sight." Her expression fell as she staggered away, eventually sitting on a chair in the yard, crying. Mrs. Cunningham, our neighbor, came out and comforted her. Lee eventually went to her house. I called Lee's mother, informing her that Lee was nearby and needed support. Ellen, her mother, wasn't very responsive, but agreed to come in an hour. I sat in the kitchen sipping coffee, unable to envision what the future held. The night prior, I contacted a lawyer I knew who referred me to family law attorney Joan Ellis. I scheduled an appointment for the following Monday, and about 30 minutes later, Miss Ellis returned my call. "Mr. Martin, this is Joan Ellis. You've scheduled an appointment for Monday regarding your wife and the basketball player." "Yes, how did you know?" "The video doesn't identify her." "Who she is? The TV reporter found out. Big Al is making headlines, especially in the gossip columns." I figured there was no use delaying until Monday. "Can you come tomorrow morning, say at 10? "Yes, at 10. Please provide me with a brief overview of your relationship with your wife and with Mr. Johnson if you're acquainted. I'll also need financial statements if available." After wrapping up our conversation, she cautioned me against impulsive actions. As I hung up, the phone rang again. I answered automatically. It was Big Al. "Marty, I'm calling to try and apologize to you. Freak you. I'll do everything in my power to make your life miserable. Idiot." Wow, it's not just me. Not just me, but her too. It just happened. I was happily married to her before she went to Miami. We have 2 kids. You're a complete prick. If you see me, run. I said it calmly, without yelling. There was no hint of emotion. There was a long pause on the other end. Then he hung up. But now I had his number. I accessed our phone account, checked the call log from Lee's phone, noting Elle's number. I only saw him after her arrival in Miami. Also, twice I couldn't access today's calls. I assumed their meeting in Miami was unplanned. Checking the Wiz schedule, they had an afternoon game in Miami on Wednesday. Big Al was the MC, so he was there on business. The doorbell chimed, and I peeked out to see my parents and in-laws. Lee was nowhere to be found. I ushered them in and offered drinks, which they declined before taking seats. Standing at the entrance to the living room, I addressed my mom, Lacey, who responded first. "We had a brief powwow on the street. We wanted to hear your thoughts," she began. I believe I let out a quiet yet distinct sob, straightening up as I looked at my mother. I guess she sensed my despair at that moment. Later, she mentioned that my gaze conveyed such devastation, melancholy, and pain that she couldn't fathom how anything could be reconciled. My dad inquired, "Is there a chance you could talk to Lee?" she asked when we were there. "For what? She won't have anything to say. She shattered our family. And it wasn't just one night, 3. She didn't even try to conceal it from her coworkers, and now the whole world knows," I replied bitterly. Ellen interjected, "I know she messed up, Marty. Big time. And she acknowledges that. But you have daughters, and you've loved each other for years. There's a lot to salvage if you can." "I don't see her as my wife anymore, and I never will. She's the mother of my kids, and that's it," I asserted. "You're hurting right now. Your pride took a blow. You need to get past it. Your marriage can't end over a few days," Ellen reasoned. "Ellen, I respect and care for you, but your daughter has caused irreparable injury. Please don't push for reconciliation. It's not happening, I insisted. She raised her hands in surrender, and I continued. You all need to think about what life will look like post-divorce or when it's finalized. My mother burst into tears. Just give it a few days, Marty, just a few. Your dad and I can take the kids for the weekend. Let's take them to the lake. I agreed, and right then, the girls got off the bus. They raced to the door, but with the code changed, they had to knock. They were surprised to see their grandparents and eager to share about their day. It wasn't all bad. Betsy mentioned her friend Sharon Davis, who had asked about the video. Linda didn't know much, and I filled them in. We'll talk about it later, I reassured them. They weren't too upset. Linda asked about her mother, and Ellen explained she was next door. The girls were worried but keen to see Lee. We sent them off to pack, though I was against them seeing her. The others felt it necessary. Once their bags were packed, Ellen fetched Lee, and they waited on the porch with their grandparents. Lee and Ellen approached. The girls didn't rush to her. They simply waited. From my bedroom window on the second floor, I could see and hear everything. Lee knelt before the girls, and they embraced.
Mom?
Linda queried.
What did you do? How could you be with that guy?
Her last words came out amidst sobs. I made a terrible mistake. I need to understand why, but I still love you girls and your dad very much, Lee responded. Betsy, the tougher of the two, was unimpressed.
If you loved Dad, you wouldn't have done this. You let it all happen on video. How could you?
Tears streamed down her face now. Lee began to cry. I'm so sorry. It's a shame. It was a terrible mistake. Lee hugged Linda, but Betsy pushed her away. Lee stood up and fled to her father's car. My parents ushered the girls into their van, and everyone went their separate ways. I remained seated on my bed, stunned and sorrowful. Then rage consumed me. Anger surged through my veins. I thrashed and screamed. Finally, I descended to the basement and began pounding on the punching bag, each blow directed at Larry or Lee. Exhausted, my hands were red and raw. I resolved that they both deserved suffering, no matter what. After tending to my injured hands, I had a nightcap and retired to bed. Sleep eluded me for a while, but eventually it claimed me. The next morning, I went for an intense, lengthy run. Then I gathered my financial documents and headed to the lawyer's office. Joan Ellis turned out to be a woman in her 40s, slender with dark hair and eyes, dressed casually in jeans and a sweatshirt. We exchanged greetings and proceeded to the conference room. I'm a bit underdressed, sorry. It's Saturday and I did some yard work, she apologized. No problem. You look great, I reassured her. She smiled and led the way. I began, Miss Ellis, I want to understand my options for divorcing my wife. I can outline them for you, but are you certain you want a divorce? It's a difficult path, especially with 2 children, right? She inquired. Yes, the twins are 13, and I'd like to see custody, I confirmed. Let's circle back to whether you truly want to end your marriage. Has something like the Miami incident happened before, or is this a one-time occurrence? She probed. I don't think she's strayed before, but I can't say for certain, I admitted. So, if it's true, you can't reconcile with it, she summarized. No, I replied firmly, without further elaboration. All right, let's talk finances, I suggested. We delved into each other's earnings and responsibilities concerning the children. Joan was pleased to discover that the house was solely mine, acquired before marriage, and that the children had lived there their entire lives. She also noted that my role as a stay-at-home parent and our compatible work schedules could sway custody in my favor. However, she cautioned that nothing was guaranteed. I earned roughly the same as Lee, but my income was less stable, I informed her. Joan believed that neither of us would likely owe child support. The non-custodial parent typically pays child support, she clarified. I'm curious how soon we can initiate divorce proceedings, I inquired. We could have the documents prepared and submitted within a week, Joan proposed. I suggest waiting longer. People can change their minds and you may be required to undergo counseling. Is there a way to avoid that? I'd prefer not to have any direct conversations with her, I expressed. You will need to have these discussions, but we can keep them to a minimum, Joan assured. I noticed your hands are bandaged. What happened? She inquired. I got a bit upset last night and took it out on a punching bag. Forgot my gloves, I explained. Well, at least you didn't visit Mr. Johnson or your wife. Speaking of which, is there a way to sue him for this? He should be held accountable, I remarked. Unfortunately, in this state, there's no legal recourse for infidelity or alienation of affection. It used to be the case, but not anymore. I also checked Florida law, and there's no option there either. He's off the hook for now, Joan informed me. My tone remained steady, which seemed to unsettle Joan. Let me see what I can do. Just refrain from any violence, please, she requested. No promises. That guy needs to pay. I won't rest easy if he gets away with this, I asserted. Mr. Martin, I must inform you that while our conversations as your attorney are confidential, if I have reason to believe you're planning a violent act, I may have to report it, or not, Joan cautioned. You won't ever have to worry about that, I assured her. Thank you for saying that. I signed an agreement with her and paid the fee, urging her to expedite the document preparation. Upon returning home around noon, my father Leland called. Hey, how are you holding up? He greeted. Fine, I replied. I just left a lawyer's office, he continued. Oh, what did they say? I inquired. We discussed the potential outcomes of a divorce. Marty, you need to take your time with this. Don't rush into anything. This decision is crucial, and you shouldn't make it hastily, he advised. Dad, the moment Lee slept with that idiot, it was over. The fact that she did it repeatedly makes it even worse. But once was enough. Mom thinks she hurt you so badly that there's no hope, I shared. I suppose she might have a point, but still, I'd like you to take it slow, at least once. Lee should have a chance to explain everything, my father suggested. What could she possibly say to change my mind? I countered. There was silence for a while, then he responded, Okay, I can't think of anything, which is what needs to be proven. We discussed the girls' moods and emotions. Linda was deeply saddened and withdrawn, while Betsy was enraged and struggled to control herself. Mom works with both of them, reassuring them that they won't lose their parents and will always have us both, he shared. With that, we bid farewell. The home phone rang. Without caller ID, I let it go to voicemail. It was Lee. Marty, if you're there, please pick up. I need to talk to you. Marty, I need this, please. I messed up and I know it. You're the only person I trust to discuss serious matters with. Will I lose you? She pleaded. No, I replied softly. Please. I understand how angry and confused you must be. I'm truly sorry, she continued amidst tears, then hung up. As she spoke, tears streamed down my face. Once again, I descended to the basement, this time wearing gloves. Despite the pain, I relentlessly punched and kicked the bag until exhaustion consumed me. Afterward, I showered. Some men might turn to hard drinksel in such situations, but I chose to channel my emotions through physical activity like running or hitting the bag. I contemplated how to confront Larry. One persistent thought was the weapon I had found, a Taurus self-loading pistol 380. While jogging, its serial number had been erased, making it illegal, yet I kept it. I cleaned it and tested it at a shooting range. I entertained the idea of using it against Larry, but the thought of jeopardizing my freedom, especially for him, dissuaded me. I pushed aside such thoughts, realizing it wasn't the time for a conversation with Lee. However, the mere thought of facing her made me feel sick. Alone in the house, despair engulfed me, suffocating me like a heavy blanket. With a sudden surge of fear, I leaped from the sofa, feeling as though someone might consider me insane if they saw me. I knew I had to move, so I went for a brisk walk, which led me past Larry's house. I didn't linger, but noted the lack of security, further fueling my unease. The house, large and new, sat close to the street, boasting a basketball hoop in the driveway. Despite the absence of a car, a spacious garage loomed behind. I strolled past it, completing a loop, and snapped a few photos with my phone. Continuing northward, I passed Lee's parents' house, where their cars were parked at the entrance. Lee's car remained in our garage. Hurrying along, I entered a store and purchased a prepaid cell phone and a Diet Pepsi, then made my way back home. It was 3 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. Upon returning home, I made myself a sandwich, though I likely consumed 3 slices. Once I stopped moving, the sense of anguish returned. Retrieving the 380, I drove out of town to a friend's property with an open shooting range, vacant as they were in Florida. I fired 2 boxes of cartridges with the pistol. Though affordable, the weapon was functional, albeit slightly heavier than ideal. On my way back, I stopped at the pharmacy and bought 2 neoprene thigh wraps. Back home, I fashioned a body bandage to secure the 380 caliber pistol around my lumbar region, testing its comfort during a run which proved satisfactory. My cell phone remained off all day, ignoring emails until I powered it on. 11 voicemails awaited me, along with around 20 text messages and numerous emails from family, colleagues, and friends, all urging me to reach out. Among them were messages from Lee, Ellen, and my mother, all echoing similar sentiments of needing to talk. However, Milt's messages stood out. In the first, he apologized for Lee's actions and for his failure to raise a responsible daughter. In the second, he proposed a conversation away from women. I dialed him, but it went to voicemail. I refrained from leaving a message, yet he promptly returned the call. "Marty, I needed to clear my head with a walk. What's going on?" "I saw you wanted to talk, Milt. Can we meet somewhere? How about Raymond Park, near the hops court?" "All right, in about 30 minutes. Sounds good." I donned my jeans and slipped the 380 into my pocket in case I encountered Larry, who lived half a mile from the park. After a 10-minute drive, I arrived early, finding Milt already there. We exchanged handshakes and settled on a bench beside the court. "I wanted to make sure you're all right. Ellen and your mom's words had me worried," Milt began. "I'm not all right, Milt. I feel worse than ever," I confessed. "Well, I recall how I felt when my mother passed. It took me a year to recover. I just kept working day after day." "That's what you should do too," he advised. "Easy to say, but damn hard to do. And it's only been a day," I countered. "If it's any consolation, Lee is nearly catatonic. She hasn't eaten since arriving at our house, and she's barely said a word. We're considering getting her help, or maybe you. Oddly enough, you seem to be holding up better than her. Maybe it's the guilt. She has it, but you don't," Milt observed. "I'm sorry to hear that, Milt, because the twins will need her. Need their mother," I expressed. "I don't understand why she is so amazed, because she did everything openly. Did you really think that no one would know? That I wouldn't know? I cannot believe it. Sooner or later even. Even without YouTube, one of her employees, some of them my friends, would have caught wind of it. I don't think she was thinking straight at all. I think she may have suddenly found herself in a strange situation, away from her family and being stalked by a celebrity. So she succumbed to feelings that, in a normal situation, I would have suppressed. Here's what I can take away from it. You're so smart, Milt. But I think she had a thing for Larry since college and thought she could have her cake." "And what are you going to do?" I inquired. "It's very, very likely that I will divorce her. Now I can't even think about her without anger and hostility. I hope I don't get sick because of all this," Milt responded. "Look, I know everyone else is telling you to wait to decide something, am I? I just can't understand how you can go back to any semblance of a family life with her," I admitted. "Yes, the case is lost. I'm going to wait, but not for long. You need to prepare her. If she's as bad as you say, I'll try," Milt concluded. And we parted ways. As I walked back to my car, parked on a nearby street, I noticed Larry dribbling a basketball up the intersecting street toward the court. I saw him and instinctively reached for my weapon. Milt, driving towards him, noticed him too, and honked the horn. Larry got startled and lost control of the ball as it rolled down the street. He recklessly chased after it without looking, resulting in a fatal accident. It wasn't Milt who hit him. A car traveling in the opposite direction struck Larry, launching him over the hood and windshield before he fell onto the street. Milt drove past the scene. I rushed to Larry's side. He was alive, but barely conscious. As I looked at him, I felt a mix of emotions, including betrayal. Paramedics arrived shortly after, but despite their efforts, they couldn't save him. The police arrived, and although I was nervous about my illegal weapon, I cooperated and was released without issue. About an hour later, I disposed of the weapon and drove to Milt's house to discuss the tragic accident. Arriving at the house, I rang the bell, and Ellen answered. Seeing my emotional state, she asked if I wanted to see Lee. "No, too early, Milt," I replied, indicating that I needed to speak with Milt first. Milt went downstairs. I waved to him, and we departed. "Milt, Big Al is dead," I informed him. "Damn, did you eliminate him? I saw you had a weapon," Milt responded with concern. "God, Marty, but he didn't look the way he should have. If he was truly upset," Milt continued. "I didn't eliminate him. He got hit by a car after you honked at him. He missed his basketball and ran outside after it like a child. I saw him die," I clarified, unable to contain a smile. "It's clear. Accident. God works in mysterious ways. I'll leave it to you or Ellen to tell Lee that her boyfriend died," I said. "He's not her boyfriend, but we'll let her know. I guess it'll be all over the news," Milt replied. "Certainly. How is she?" I inquired. "Also not good. On the contrary, you look upbeat," Milt observed. "I even felt deceived when he died. But then I saw this as a saving grace. Marty, I want to save my daughter. I think she's heading into the abyss. I know she screwed up, but I love her, and I want her to have a life. Therefore, I ask you, if you see a way, at least do not interfere. Maybe later you can lend a helping hand," Milt requested earnestly. "It's a difficult request, but I ask, Milt. I have to think about this. If we talk to her too soon, I won't be able to help. You have to keep her away from me. Let me think it over. I'll try to find a way out, I promised. Congratulations on escaping homicide, Milt remarked with a chuckle as we laughed and returned to the house. I left by car. That night I slept. The girls called me and we had a good talk. Then I just went to bed. On Sunday, I became depressed again. It was a nice day and I had nothing better to do than think about the state of my marriage. No matter what Milt said, I knew Lee and I could never be together again. This made me sad, but it is true. I did another long run, walked down to the shopping center along the river and returned home. I showered and went to see my parents and kids for a Sunday picnic. The twins were in a better mood. They had a conference call with Lee, who must have perked up because she was encouraging them. I've wondered this. Mom said there was no mention of Big Al, Lee's infidelity, or Larry's pass away. Only talk about school. Lee told the girls she would see them as soon as she got better. I had a good time with my parents and girls. While they were in the pool, I told my parents that I saw Big Al get hit and die. They were shocked. My father said, "You didn't have anything, you know?" "No, it's a coincidence. I was in that park with Milt talking. He just drove off and Larry got hit. He rushed outside to get his ball." "Fine. Well, I can't say I'm sorry. May the Lord have mercy on his soul." We changed the subject. Joan Ellis called me on Monday. First, I wanted to know how I felt about Larry's pass away. She didn't know I was there. My name was not published. I told her the whole story and she was amazed, maybe a little suspicious. I know that if I were her, I would be suspicious too. She then said that the documents would be ready on Wednesday and asked me to let me know when I wanted them to be served. I told her to wait a little because Lee was in bad shape. I made a promise of sorts to Milt. The kids decided to go to school. Even though Big Al's pass away and his outburst the week before were big news, I was left alone and decided to work, working half a day for the Army for 2 or 3 hours. I went about my business. Then I picked up the girls from school. After their extra classes, we ate pizza. It was something I could make myself, and they loved my pizza. We had a pleasant evening, but before going to bed, both of them inquired about their mother's return. I responded truthfully, "I doubt we'll have the same agreements as before. The future is uncertain, but I don't see us reverting to how things used to be. There's something else awaiting us, but we'll always love both of you." Milt called on Tuesday, followed by Ellen. They wanted to meet, so I agreed to meet them at Starbucks. While grabbing our drinks, Milt mentioned he'd contacted a marriage counselor and suggested I engage with Lee. Ellen added that if we proceed with divorce on the grounds of infidelity, the court would likely mandate counseling anyway. "Okay," I replied. "But I won't deceive. Even if we dive into this and explore deeper, I still doubt it'll benefit her." Ellen reassured, "We're not asking you to deceive. Just take it slow. Listen to the psychologist. Communicate with Lee. Otherwise, she may face significant challenges. We didn't disclose that you were present during Big Al's accident." The first session was scheduled for the following Monday at 10 in the morning. I arrived punctually, preferring not to wait in the same room as Lee. The consultant was Sylvia Price, a psychologist and certified marriage and family counselor, a woman in her 50s, slightly plump but amiable. She ushered us into her office. Until then, Lee and I hadn't exchanged a word. She appeared unwell, pale, and kept rubbing her hands. Dr. Price briefed us on her practice, including handling cases of infidelity. She asked about my counseling goal. I aim to move forward in life and remain a good father to my children. However, I don't believe reconciliation in marriage is feasible, I stated. "Lee, what are your goals?" Dr. Price inquired. "I wish to reclaim my former life. It may not be possible, but I desire to remain Marty's wife, even if things aren't the same," Lee responded. Dr. Price surveyed each of us. As I understand it, Lee attended a work conference in Miami where she reconnected with a man from her university days, and they spent several nights together, Dr. Price remarked. Lee affirmed this. "I couldn't fathom that our Miami affair would become public knowledge. I assumed it would only be during my absence from the family." Dr. Price probed further. "If that's the case, why did you go dancing with Mr. Johnson? You must have known he was a public figure." Lee explained, "I thought it would be enjoyable. It wasn't near the hotel. Actually, it was fun. But I knew Hughes, my colleague, would find out about us, and of course, I realized Marty would soon learn too. Perhaps not as quickly as he actually did. Let's set that aside for now," Dr. Price redirected. "Marty, could you explain why you're convinced the marriage is over?" I gazed directly at Lee, the person I loved and trusted the most in this world. When I witnessed her readiness to betray me so readily and openly, I was devastated. My grandparents died in an accident, and I endured immense pain for a long time. But nothing compares to this. Never have I experienced such devastation. If Lee could do this to me, then anyone could. I could never grant her or anyone else that level of control again. Lee openly wept as I voiced this. I wanted to express that I would never trust her again. How do you feel seeing her like this? I'm just sorrowful and also extremely furious. It was so outrageously cruel to me and to our children as well. Even if it was done out of foolishness, without the intention to inflict pain. It was so wrong. And for what? 3 nights with some guy you fancied in college? I gazed directly at her. When I asked this, Lee sobbed. No, I don't know why I did it. Dr. Price intervened. Lee, calm down. Is it true that you had romantic feelings for Mr. Johnson back in college? Yes, he was this big, handsome, famous guy. He pursued me persistently, but I was with Marty and I declined. So I asked, then why did you agree? Leading up to Miami, I felt a bit disconnected for a few months. We've all been so occupied. I was looking forward to a few days in Miami, thinking it might re-energize me. But as soon as I arrived, I saw Larry. He hugged me tightly, and I realized that I wouldn't resist if he made a move. Everything happened so fast. I can't make sense of it, I remarked. We had amazing lovemaking the night before you left, didn't we? Or were you just pretending? No, it was genuine. It kept me tingling throughout the flight. Damn, I feel awful. Lee began crying again. My tears flowed too, but my seething anger returned. I didn't believe I could contain it, so I stood up and walked to the outer office. I was about to lash out at the furniture when Dr. Price came out. Why don't you take a moment in the men's room? I'll talk to Lee alone first. Then I'll speak with you in private. That's exactly what I did. The two of them spent about 15 minutes together. Lee emerged, no longer crying. Sorry, Marty. With that, she left, and Dr. Price asked me, Marty, how do you feel about Mr. Johnson's pass away? You know, I was there and saw him die, and I felt relieved that he died. I could have done it myself, but he was eliminated first. It's ugly, but it's the truth. And now the same thing, maybe even worse. This guy ruined my whole life over some nonsense. I felt cheated that I couldn't end him. Why does Lee's affair with Larry spell the ruin of your entire life? I was a devoted family man, nothing more. What I said about betrayal, I'll never get over it. I can't fathom trusting anyone again. Lee shattered that trust. But it's only been a few days. Let me ask, have you considered how intense the closeness was between Lee and Larry? Yes, I saw on YouTube that they were completely consumed by desire for each other. And how did it make you feel? Betrayed. It was the ultimate betrayal. Lee, no matter what happens, she'll always have the memory of her steamy affair. If we had stayed married, I'd always suspect she was thinking of him during our carnal moments. You know, I want to erase that memory for her, and I fully intend to. It's the least I can do. A tough situation. This is someone you deeply love. I truly loved her deeply in the past. That's why it hurts so much. She gutted me. That concludes the session. She asked me to think about what living arrangements could be made if we separated history.
I was tasked with presenting the details about my trip to Miami and why I felt vulnerable. I also outlined potential paths to reconciliation between Marty and me before heading to Miami. I felt out of sorts, no longer finding enjoyment in the things I once loved. Work had become monotonous, and family life followed suit. This had been the case for several months now, leaving me with a vague sense of stagnation. I eagerly anticipated my trip to Miami. One coworker, Brady Bean, had been persistently pursuing me since he transferred to our office. Despite my efforts to brush him off for months, treating him as a joke, he remained undeterred. While he wasn't Adonis, he was good-looking and cheerful. His continued advances didn't offend me. Rather, I was flattered, although I made it clear I wasn't interested. However, I knew I had an effect on him, which bolstered my ego. I entertained the idea but never intended to act on it, considering it too risky, even if he were exceptionally attractive, which he wasn't. However, at our hotel check-in, Larry appeared. He was undeniably attractive. His enthusiastic hug caught me off guard, and I realized he could seduce me if he tried. He seemed to understand this too because he wasted no time. Taking me aside, he asked if Marty was with me. When I said no, he informed me he had a hotel room until Friday and expressed his desire for me, convinced I felt the same. I agreed to dinner with him. I can't fully explain why I succumbed so easily, feeling like a fool. Marty and I had passionate lovemaking the night before, leaving me on edge, a feeling Larry seemed to share. I didn't consider the consequences if Marty found out I cheated, or if I did, it was fleeting. I convinced myself I was in a different world for those few days. At dinner, Larry and I both knew where the evening would lead. We skipped dessert and went straight to his room. He pulled me close, and we quickly shed our clothes, consumed by desire. There was no time for foreplay. He took me to his bed, and we were carnal for a long time. After experiencing multiple climaxes, I lost consciousness briefly, only to be awakened by his kiss, signaling the start of round 2. This pattern continued into the next morning. I missed breakfast with the team and barely made it to the meeting. I felt physically satisfied, and I suspected my colleagues noticed, though there were no direct comments. I entertained the thought that someone might inform Marty, but dismissed it. They're clueless. It's all speculation. The closeness with Larry was unparalleled, possibly due to the distance from home and the freedom from family obligations, coupled with his muscular physique. Plus, he seemed as eager for me as I was for him. He could have had any woman, yet he chose me. My desire for him was overwhelming. After a work meeting, I reached out to him. We went straight to his room, spent 2 hours making love, then ordered room service, followed by more closeness. The following morning brought the same curious glances. A bit uneasy, I met Larry in his room at 5 p.m., and we remained in bed until 8. The passion was still intense, but not quite as electric as the first 2 nights. Room service delivered our meals. Then he suggested we go dancing, which we did. That's how we ended up on YouTube. I watched our video knowing full well Marty had seen it. That night, I realized what Marty saw, a faithful wife openly lusting after another man. After dancing, we returned to the hotel for more closeness. The next morning, with a flight looming, Larry and I made love again, showered and dressed. We had breakfast in his room before I returned to mine to pack. My roommate Cindy mentioned seeing me dance on YouTube, calling it spicy. Horror engulfed me. I knew I was done for. Then I ran into Bart Kovach, Marty's close friend. On the airport bus, I asked if Marty had called during my Miami trip. We hadn't been in touch. Bart informed me Marty had seen the YouTube video, knowing I spent every night with Larry. Speechless, the flight home was excruciating. No one wanted to speak to me. Sitting by the window, a stranger occupied the adjacent seat. I knew Larry was on the flight, but didn't spot him. Disembarking, I scanned for Larry in vain. He approached me at baggage claim, asking if I'd be okay. I replied it would likely never be the same. He seemed downcast. Unprepared for Marty to pick me up, I queued for a taxi. When I boarded, the dispatcher seated Larry with me. We were dropped off near each other. In the cab, Larry apologized for the YouTube incident, admitting he hadn't thought it through. I declined conversation, asking the driver to drop Larry off first. Back home, unable to face Marty's devastated and enraged expression, I fled. Since then, I've stayed with my parents. I'm in a near constant daze. Attempting to talk to the girls was futile. Betsy rebuffed me, understandably. Phone calls were a bit better, though it took an hour to muster the courage. Now I attend counseling sessions. After that initial counseling session, I felt like my marriage had reached its end, heavily influenced by Marty's candid expression of his emotions. Now I'm grappling with how to navigate his anger and sorrow. I'm at a loss as to how I could possibly earn back his trust. I know I don't deserve him. And then there's Larry. He's gone, eliminated in a car accident. When my mother broke the news, I felt immense sorrow. During our taxi ride, Larry urged me to call him. Truthfully, I could have, but he's no longer here. That absence adds to my sense of emptiness. If I ever were to be carnal with another man, I'm certain memories of my time with Larry would linger. However, now I'm not so sure. I can't shake the feeling that if I had turned him down, he might still be alive. It doesn't make logical sense, yet it feels that way. I feel utterly lost. There's a gradual improvement on the home front, although the struggles persist. The twins are coping with school, but it's been a challenge. Betsy's anger lingers, and Linda deeply feels her mother's absence. Despite our nightly teleconferencing, it's hard to gauge Lee's progress from our brief calls. During our second counseling session, each of us had an individual session before coming together. Dr. Price prompted us to consider what might facilitate reconciliation. While I couldn't envision a path to rebuilding trust, I pondered if understanding Lee's motives for her affair could pave the way. However, I remained skeptical of her remorse. Reflecting on her actions, it seems Lee sought a fleeting thrill without considering the consequences. But I can't shake the feeling that perhaps she wanted to be caught, signaling deeper issues. Despite her pleas for forgiveness, I find it difficult to believe her sincerity. Even if Lee genuinely apologized and explained her actions, I'm uncertain if I could continue our relationship. It feels like I'm standing beside a ticking time bomb. Consequently, I've made the decision to proceed with filing for divorce. Today, amidst the weight of divorce papers landing on my doorstep, I found myself reflecting on the evolution of my marriage. Marty's demeanor in our recent counseling session revealed a subtle shift, a resigned acceptance, perhaps, of the inevitable end. This acknowledgement marked a pivotal moment in our journey, signaling the beginning of the end. As I returned to the workplace, the atmosphere was chilling, with colleagues casting judgmental glances and even Brady Bean distancing himself, a stark reminder of the fallout from my actions. Consulting with my lawyer, I navigated the murky waters of custody arrangements, grappling with the reality that Marty's primary role as the homeowner would likely grant him greater custody rights. Despite the emotional turmoil, I opted for transparency, confessing my infidelity to expedite the legal proceedings. Remarkably, neither Marty nor I harbored animosity over financial matters, a testament, perhaps, to the deeper wounds our marriage suffered. Reflecting on my affair, I couldn't help but feel a sense of detachment from Larry's role in it. While I acknowledge my own culpability, I also recognize his part in the betrayal. Dr. Price's probing into my behavior hinted at an underlying desire for excitement, but the reality is far from liberating. Instead, I find myself grappling with a profound sense of loss and emptiness, manifested in my waning appetite for both food and closeness. Despite the allure of a potentially freer existence, I'm left feeling adrift, disconnected from the social scene, and disinterested in the advances of others. As I navigate this tumultuous period, I'm left pondering the duration of this melancholy, wondering when, or if, I'll find solace amidst the wreckage of my shattered marriage.
Today, the divorce proceedings reached their conclusion, granting me primary custody of the twins, while Lee will have visitation rights every other weekend, 2 weeks during the summer and during Thanksgiving or Christmas. Despite the separation, we've maintained a semblance of routine for the girls, ensuring they receive 2 gifts for each holiday, with the Christmas haul potentially expanding. Our living arrangements mirror the past 6 months, with Lee residing a mere 2 miles away in her own apartment. I've extended an open invitation to Milt and Ellen, who frequently visit, ensuring they maintain a connection with the girls during Lee's weekends. As for my personal life, I've cautiously dipped my toes into the dating pool, casually socializing with divorced acquaintances, including 3 women from our former circle of friends. These encounters are lighthearted, typically consisting of dinners or bowling outings, underscored by a clear understanding of my reluctance to commit to anything serious. While some may hold out hope for my eventual healing, I remain skeptical, acknowledging the enduring pain inflicted by Lee's betrayal. The mere thought of her with that other man still haunts me, a wound that refuses to fully heal despite my best efforts to suppress it. The twins, meanwhile, are adjusting to the new normal, with Linda displaying kindness towards Lee, while Betsy harbors lingering resentment, mirroring my own guarded nature. This dynamic remains unspoken between Lee and me, as communication between us has dwindled to a minimum, driven by my desire to minimize painful encounters. Despite Ellen's concerns for Lee's well-being, I find it difficult to summon any sympathy, still grappling with the unanswered questions surrounding her actions. It's a chapter of my life I'm eager to close, yet its impact lingers, a constant reminder of betrayal and shattered trust. It's tempting to attribute everything to a series of unlikely coincidences. Lee's vague discontent, the opportunity to go to Miami, and, crucially, her meeting with Larry, All converge to unravel the marriage. It's a dead end, a point of no return. Update. 1 year later, Milt Moore found himself on the golf course, his regular foursome disrupted by the presence of an old school friend, Fred Cunningham. As they strolled from the ninth tee, they broached a personal conversation, one they hadn't dared to discuss over the phone. "How are you holding up these days, Fred?" Milt inquired. "I'm managing," Fred replied, his tone tinged with resignation. "I decided to confront it head on. I followed him from his house, just as you suggested. It was also routine, his Saturday afternoon golfing ritual, even after retirement. It was a shock to read about it in the papers. I never imagined he'd dart into the street like that, but I knew I had to act." Milt nodded in understanding. "Your honk likely startled him. It shook me to the core as well. It felt like divine intervention protecting Marty in the nick of time. But seeing him die, witnessing it firsthand, I was stunned. I called emergency immediately. And Marty, he was right there. It left me questioning everything." "I knew Marty carried a weapon," Fred admitted somberly. "I feared he'd take matters into his own hands eventually. He had a right to feel cheated, but did Larry deserve to die? It's hard to say. What's clear is that Marty and the girls deserved to live. As did Lee. It's a heavy burden to bear." Their conversation trailed off, unspoken words hanging in the air. They walked in silence, side by side, each grappling with their own thoughts, a silent acknowledgement of the weight of their shared secret.